Good evening. I'm Matthews Mayor John Higdon. Welcome to our January 9th, 2023 Matthews Board of Commissioners meeting, the first meeting of this year. So we're looking forward to getting some good work done. I'd like to start with some recognizing people here on the dais. On my left and your right is our Assistant Town Manager, Malia Gordon, Commissioner Renee Garner, Commissioner Larry Whitley, Mayor Pro Tem Ken McCool, our Town Manager Becky Hawk, Town Attorney Charlie Buckley, Commissioner Mark Tofano, Commissioner Gina Hoover, Commissioner John Urban, our Town Clerk Lori Canapino, our Planning Director Jay Camp, and our Communications Coordinator Maureen Keith. Tonight I have the privilege of giving our invocation. I'd like to start by saying MLK Day, which this year falls on January 16th, is dedicated to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., as we all know, an American Baptist minister and activist and one of the most prominent leaders of the civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. Martin Luther King Jr. dedicated his life to freedom and justice for all. So if you wish, please join me as we remember one of Martin's short prayers that I believe will serve as an inspiration for this board and to the Matthews community. Oh God, we thank you for the lives of the great saints and prophets in the past who have revealed to us that we can stand up amid the problems and difficulties and trials of life and not give in. We thank you for our foreparents who've given us something in the midst of the darkness of exploitation and oppression to keep going. Grant that we will go on with the proper faith and the proper determination of will so that we will be able to make a creative contribution to this world. In the name and spirit of Jesus we pray, amen. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, the adoption of the agenda. I'll ask the manager if we have any additions, deletions, or movements within the agenda.
No changes, Mr. Mayor.
I'll entertain a motion to adopt.
So moved.
I'll second it.
A motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, a second by Commissioner Whitley. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We'll now receive information on the Silver Line Light Rail from CAT Senior Project Manager Andy Mott. Andy is joining us remotely.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me get my presentation up. Apologies. There we go. All right. Can everyone see the screen in presentation mode?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor Higdon and board, and I appreciate the indulgence while I get my technology set up. I'm here tonight to give a overview of the Link Silver Line Center City analysis and the upcoming and with the public engagement process that we went through getting us to this point, as well as a preview of the MTC information and action, which will be occurring later this month. So just a brief discussion of kind of what's got us here through the last couple months of this Center City Charlotte analysis, the public feedback of that, the adoption of the where we are as far as the analysis, the Charlotte City Council endorsement, and the upcoming MTC. So a little bit of history and this is all focused on Center City Charlotte alignment. That's been the primary conversation over the last couple months. So what brought us to the alignment that we have right now is part of System Update in 2018, adopted the locally preferred alternative as following 11th Street around the northern side of Center City adjacent to 11th Street. And that with the primary goal of seeking and attaining economic development benefits within the city of Charlotte. There's a lot of underutilized property and that's part of Center City, as well as getting a one-seat ride to Charlotte Gateway Station in a continuous alignment that goes the whole way from east to west without any transfer. So you could go the whole way from end to end with one-seat ride. One key distinction there, at the system update, there was assumed to be mostly at grade along 11th Street, meaning it was at the street elevation, and that's what was adopted at that time. In 2020, our team, the Silverline design environmental team, really picked up and really started to get into a lot of the details for how exactly that would work. And then we really got into a lot of detailed engineering and implementation analysis. Working with town staff, we did the same thing in the town of Matthews. And within the city of Charlotte, that led to more of an elevated guideway within the center city. So elevated stations, a long bridge around the center city. That increased the cost and the technical challenges of the project. So that was adopted in 2021, then re-adopted in 21 and 22. But there were some concerns coming out of that about the elevated nature of it and the accessibility of it, and and that connection to the Blue Line. And so that concerns come from elected leadership within the city of Charlotte, and that really took us to a study with a third-party study called Urban Land Institute, or the ULI. And they noted some opportunities to improve those connections, but they also noted or recommended that we evaluate something called interlining, which is really just running the light rail on the same tracks as the Silver Line or the Blue Line or the Gold Line. So here's the alternatives that we came up with after about 6 months of thinking that through and coming up with different ways that we could possibly evaluate that. So I'll give a very brief overview of the three alternatives. This has not really changed since last time I was in front of the board in October, I believe. So the first option, the purple line, that is the locally preferred alternative, and that goes along the northern side of Center City, past and over the Blue Line, adjacent to the Brookshire Freeway and 11th Street, with stations at the Blue Line, Graham Street, First Ward, and then it terminates at Charlotte Gateway Station, which is where the Amtrak is planned to be. And so that entire section from Central Avenue to Charlotte Gateway Station is a bridge, so it's elevated. The second option is called Shared Blue Line, and it really follows a very similar alignment as the locally preferred alternative. But right here near Davison Street, it kind of peels off and then enters into the Blue Line. It runs on the same tracks as the Blue Line that's out there today. So the footprint or the construction is a little more straightforward as far as it's less of an impact to the community because we're just operating on the same tracks. Now there are certainly some challenges to make that maneuver from the 12th Street corridor into the Blue Line, but it's less disruptive than some of the other alternatives. And then the Shared Gold Line follows along the locally preferred alternative along 11th Street, then peels off here at Charlottetown, and then comes along and rebuilds the Gold Line and Trade Street so that you could have more of a dedicated guideway, so we could have better reliability than the Gold Line does today. And it terminates at Charlotte Gateway Station as well. So we presented those options to the public. We had a very robust outreach campaign, a lot of mailers and all that sort of thing. And we had a public survey with about 1,100 surveyors participants, and that went through the whole month of November. And we also did an incentive, which allowed us to have really good responses and results. And we also had 2 public meetings, live virtual public meetings with over 100 attendees. As far as our demographics, I think we really improved the diversity of our demographics. We have a much larger share of the 50 to 100,000 total income range, more than before. That's really a good range for us, and we had a much larger input from the African American community, almost double what we had the last round. So we're really excited about the opportunities in reaching out to different communities, and we also had a much larger, more diverse input from the Hispanic and Latino community, about 19%, which is about double what we've seen before. So as far as the activities, we had the public meetings in November 1st and 2nd. We have pop-up campaigns at the Transportation Center, Central Piedmont Community College, and Trade and Tryon. We met with all the committees in all the communities along the center city that are directly affected, and also worked with the institutions and the developers adjacent to the project to really get everyone's feedback. Some of the survey responses that we received, it was kind of a mixed bag as far as the supportive. The Shared Gold Line and the LPA were kind of in the ballpark of the most supported at 39% for the LPA, and Shared Gold Line at about 43%. And as you could imagine, the people who like the LPA like the opportunity to serve different parts of Center City, and really kind of get to different areas than is currently served by transit. But they didn't like that the converse is that they didn't like that it doesn't hit Trade and Tryon, and they didn't like the higher cost of the bridge. So, but the Shared Gold Line, a lot of people liked that it was taking you right down Trade Street, but there's certainly it's a pretty disruptive alternative because it does require the reconstruction of the Gold Line in the Trade Street, and a lot of people thought that was a negative thing. Shared Blue Line option, it was not as supported primarily because it requires a transfer, and there's no one-seat ride between the southeast and the west any longer. It requires a transfer at CTCs. That was a major drawback of that. So anyone going, say, from Matthews to the airport would have to transfer. So that was a negative thing. But a lot of people liked it was lower cost, and they liked that it was less disruptive. So from the stakeholders' perspective, we met with all the development community adjacent to the LPA, and some of the concerns that we heard about the folks who are working and building parts of the city, and as well as Amtrak directly adjacent. They definitely was concerned with short-term scheduled delays to Charlotte Gateway Station Amtrak. They were concerned about impacts to current and future development opportunities. So, changing locations of the station, changing location of the alignment would negatively affect their development. There was definitely some concerns from Central Piedmont Community College about how pedestrian and vehicle access would work. How could we make Elizabeth Avenue safe for students, and how would people get to and from school? Very important. And then change of character in Trade Street. Trade Street would be a very different alignment, a very different infrastructure. Right now, the Gold Line goes down Trade Street, but there's not a dedicated guideway. So with the Silver Line, if we were to do the Shared Gold Line option, all access would have to change. It would be mostly right in, right out, really no lefts associated with. So there's a lot of concerns from the business community about rebuilding Trade Street and the Gold Line again, and also all the things that would have to change to make that work from an access perspective. But there's also comments that really said to really focus on ridership as the guidepost to make this decision. It's very important. It's very important variable in this overall analysis. So just as kind of at a high level, the locally preferred alternative as adopted, and you folks have probably heard a lot about this in media recently. So that was what the City of Charlotte committee has recommended. So a couple of the highlights of it: it is the most reliable transit operation. So because of that big bridge, it does provide the most reliable. So there's no cross streets. So if you get on, anywhere from Central Avenue, you won't have to cross the street. It's very unlikely that the train would be slowed down or stopped by traffic or anything else because you're elevated. Now that comes at a very high cost. So there's a big cost associated with that, but you get that reliability for that cost. It also gets you an integrated station at CGS with an Amtrak, and provides you the development opportunities that the city is seeking to achieve the vision of Center City within the northern and western sides of Center City. Also has a lot of stakeholder buy-in, so a lot of momentum over the last couple of years moved towards this locally preferred alternative. So there's a lot of energy around it. And one thing to note is that the ridership between the options is really not distinguishing between each one of them. That's something that's been reported pretty widely by local media outlets, and I have a slide on that to kind of talk about that a little bit head on. So this shows our ridership analysis between the three alternatives. The top line that you see, I don't know if people can see my cursor or my little arrow, shows the existing ridership, excuse me, with the existing development patterns in Center City and the existing transit and highway growth. So that's 2019. So what we see there is a general slightly more ridership for the Shared Blue Line and Shared Gold Line than the 11th Street alternative in existing conditions, because a lot of the development around and growth for the travel markets is along the Blue Line and along Trade Street. So, serving that with these investments pays dividends in ridership as the development patterns are today. However, when you look at future growth patterns in the Metro Atlanta Community Viz model, and here's some of the information about it, really predicts really high growth throughout the Center City. So all of Center City will be highly and densely developed in the future, is the way that the growth model is projected. With that development, it really is not distinguishing between the three alternatives. These alternatives, 31,400, 30,500, from a model perspective, shot out into the future, those are very, very close and really not differentiating between the three alternatives. So our kind of findings from that is that the ridership model is really not distinguishing in the way that you would make this decision from a center city Charlotte perspective. It really kind of comes down to a kind of a priority, a council policy, is that where do they want to focus the project, the station, and the investment in, and the ridership model. Because of the uniform growth across center city, it kind of doesn't matter where you put it. Ridership is going to be strong in center city no matter what. So with that, the city council endorsement, there was a vote that was held through the committee, the Transportation Committee, on January 3rd. And it was voted unanimously to recommend the locally approved alternative for those reasons. And staff supports that recommendation. A couple other things that were on the table, and then I'll pause, is that there was also talk about the Moorhead extension, and that is an extension of the Phase A terminus to stop at Moorhead, which is right near where Panther Stadium is. It's been very widely, very successful, very supported by the community and the stakeholders in that area who want to see that, that extension, that additional station, so you can get better access to the development opportunities and to the stadium opportunities. So that's something that we're certainly evaluating. It does come at a pretty high cost, especially with the locally preferred alternative, which is it's just a longer bridge, so it's quite expensive. I think that's something we want to continue evaluating. We think there's could be a lot of benefit, but there comes at a pretty high cost, and all that needs to be discussed to make sure that we're on the same page. So that's something that we're kind of putting a little bit of a thumbtack in until we figure out what our plan is. And at this point, I don't think we're prepared to make a recommendation on that one at the moment. And then the third option, this is just a minor refinement. I'm going through the other options that are they're going to be part of the MTC action coming up this month, is really a minor refinement in the station at Bojangles. The purple line is the locally preferred alternative through the Bojangles parking lot, and the dashed yellow line is an alternative that we're putting forward for adoption. And the key there is it's about the impact to the existing infrastructure, and the dashed yellow line has less impact on the street network and less impacts on NCDOT. So with a no, so our recommendation for the MTC information item on January 25th will be for no actions for the center city alignment and terminus, because we're reaffirming the LPA as adopted, and then a new adoption for the Bojangles Ovens alignment based on the new LPA alignment, which is a minor refinement of a station, but it's meaningful to us and it's meaningful to the community to get that adopted. From an upcoming meetings perspective, we've run through the gamut over the last couple months, going through all this, and we're kind of heading towards the end with an MTC information and action later this month. So with that, I'll pause, Mayor Higdon, and take any questions that folks might have.
Any questions from anyone on the board? I'm not seeing any, Mr. Mock, although I'm sure I'll have a few by the time we have our MTC meeting. So
please give me a call.
I'll do it. Okay, if there's nothing else, thank you. Move on to the next agenda item, public comment. Anyone who is registered in advance will speak first. We do have one person, Vance McBride. If you'd like to speak, please. That's okay.
I got 5 minutes. I want to talk fast if that's possible. One thing I see about the budget, Coliseum Ovens, it's going to cut that parking lot in half. I've been to Bojangles Coliseum back there when Sinatra was there. Been a long time. I'm old. I see a problem with the location of the track in that parking lot. Further discussion, anybody wants to talk about it, we can talk about it later. Is this general discussion or do I have to stick with the links line?
You can bring up anything you like, but if you're interested in speaking about one of the public hearing items, it'd be best. to do
Okay.
that During, during the public hearing.
Okay.
Public hearing item.
I didn't hear exactly what you said, but I'll try to keep it down to minimum. To give a little background about the links line that's coming through Matthews. The service roads of 74 that have been paid for by the construction of the and I hate it when I forget words, businesses along 74. That was a good move by Matthews. The only trouble is when I talked to DOT, I asked what kind of credit does Matthews get since they've already got the service roads along 74? None, because it does not meet state standards. Also, the leadership, previous leadership in town, because I have been to many town meetings. Some of them wanted to throw me out, but I was too heavy. The leadership in previous hierarchies of Matthews government did not have the forethought of supporting the citizens of Matthews or the town itself. If they had been the example on the service roads of 74, there would have been a refund or some type of reward for having state approved roads. Those roads will be torn up. Another thing, when I moved in 72, Hood's Crossroads, nobody knows what Hood's Crossroads is. I do. I've started searching. There's a plaque in the shopping center, which I've driven by many times. Inez Hood had a plantation of 2,000 acres, mostly in the Mint Hill area. There is no designation, no plaques, no naming of Hood's Crossroads. I think in the center of Hood's Crossroads, the traffic circle, which is a stupid idea on town, state of North Carolina, should have some kind of notation as to what that is, which is Hood's Crossroads. The other thing is Idlewild Road, whoever came up with the idea of Gateway to Matthews ought to be shot. That road, Idlewild, which is residential, will turn into be commercial. I will not be here, either moving or dying by the time it goes commercial. The reason for Idlewild now, it's hard for us to get it out of the development and make a left turn to come in towards Charlotte, is because of traffic. The construction of that was done on 74, people found Segrist Shortcut in Idlewild. Traffic is heavy. That needs to be a minimum of 5 lanes, center lane being wider for us elderly people to pull out and make a left turn. I know that's DOT because that used to be one of the 2 main roads east towards Monroe, which was Monroe Road and Idlewild. So that is part of DOT. Traffic circle at Hood's Crossroads instead of yield, specifically because the traffic coming north from Mint Hill and west from Union County need a stop sign, not a
Sir.
yield sign.
So your 5 minutes is up. I appreciate your
Okay.
comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you, Mr.
will
Rutt.
be back.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody else that's in the room tonight like to make a public comment? Again, if you want to talk about the public hearing, you can do that during the public hearings. Anybody else want to make a public comment? Do we have anybody in our virtual audience, Maureen, that would care to make a comment? All right, we'll move on to the next agenda item number 7, recess the regular meeting and open public hearings on applications to amend the Unified Development Ordinance and Land Use Map of the Town of Matthews. I'll entertain a motion as such.
So moved. Second.
A motion by Mayor Pro Tem Ken McCool, second by Commissioner John Urban. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Public hearings will be held until 10 p.m. if necessary. Any public hearing that has not been opened by then will be continued to our February 13th meeting. Jay, I'd like to start by asking you to introduce the planning board members that are present, please.
Sure, happy to. Good evening. Our Matthews Planning Board here on the first 2 rows. On the front row, Doug Rose, Sarah Walker. On the second row, Bob Jackson, Jim Johnson, Howie Labner, Chris Huzar, and Jonathan Clayton. And I especially want to welcome both Bob and Chris. This is their first evening on Planning Board with us. So I want to thank them for joining up on our Planning Board coming 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. I've said it fairly often, but our planning board is one of the most requires some of the most time and effort. So we really appreciate you helping us out with that. Move on to item A, zoning application 2022-749 Sante Matthews to change the zoning from RVS and R15 to MUD, RVS, BHCD on that certain 82+ acre site located at the intersection of Stallings and Idlewild Road and the I-45 interchange, and being designated as many different tax parcels that I'm not going to read. Further identified as 14704 Idlewild Road. This was continued from December 12th. Mr. Camp.
Yes, sorry, Nadine Bennett couldn't be with us this evening. Just wanted to share in the memo you have this evening, there has been a request for a continuance to February 13th, I believe it is. Noted in the memo, the applicant still continues to work with council. They've met with 5 of you thus far to share, hear feedback from you all and look at how they could make improvements to the plan. I think they're also planning open house this month and continue to work with the neighborhood on changes to the plan. Also some major changes to the TIA potentially as well. So with having said all that, they didn't have a plan they wanted to share this evening or don't yet really have an updated plan they're ready to share, and I respectfully request a continuance to February 13th.
It's my understanding both the applicant and staff does not plan to make any sort of presentation this evening.
This is correct. Yes.
Okay, so would anybody in the audience care to speak on this application? I would recommend you wait till February till we have the presentation. Hearing none, is there anybody in the virtual audience, Maureen, that has expressed an interest making comment? All right, I entertain a motion to continue this item till our February 13th meeting.
I'd like to move that they continue the public hearing for Santine Matthews 2022-749 to February 13th, 2023. Second.
A motion by Commissioner Tofano, a second by Mayor Pro Tem McCool. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That will be continued. Thank you. Move on to the next item. Zoning application 2022-765 text amendment to amend the text of section 155.504.3.c.3 by adding language that allows more than 600 dwelling units in the ENT-O district to receive construction permits and certificates of occupancy prior to the date in which 40,000 square feet of new commercial space has been completed or is under construction in the ENT-O district, provided that each development project that includes dwelling units contains a specified minimum amount of new commercial space. This was continued from December 12th. Darren, please explain what I just said.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so it's been a while since we've gone over this one. We did have a meeting back on November 28th. It was a 5:30 meeting to kind of discuss the ENT district and the ENT overlay district. So the ENT overlay district currently has it has a cap of 600 dwelling units for the entire overlay area. That cap will be automatically lifted once 40,000 square feet of commercial space is constructed. Currently, the district is on pace to hit that 600.
Excuse me,
square
can I
feet.
have somebody close the door in the back? Thank you. Sorry, Darren, go ahead.
Oh, it's fine. Right, so we were looking at, we did have a text amendment to potentially raise that cap or give some type of exemption. Originally, when we came back in September, there were a few different proposals. We met in November. And then ultimately, the board seemed kind of willing to maybe remove that 40,000 square feet. We'd kind of talked about that not being enough generally for the district. We'd mentioned that the town hall, the building that we're currently in, is roughly, I think it's about 38,000 square feet. And so we were looking at potentially using that or adding more commercial space to the district on a case-by-case basis as we're going through these conditional rezoning processes into the ENT overlay base district. We did receive a new proposal from the applicant. It does seek to kind of highlight and activate some of the street frontages that you would see that commercial or retail would generally provide for an area. So in this case, it would provide or it would propose to provide some outlet for some type of public art in the right of way, placemaking ventures, things like that. Jay, if you could scroll down to the next page. Yeah, that's fine. Right, so really just bringing that street level activation in the ENT district. It is a little bit odd with this one because again, we are working with an overlay district, so it applies to every site in that district, not just the conditional districts. But some of the things that I think we were all kind of aiming for with activation. Go ahead and scroll to the next page. You know, it's providing that rich active detail on the street level, maybe not just from shop fronts, but also from any like type of patio or plaza area, putting in that pedestrian scale. Like, as you can see here, this is in Denver, Colorado. They've gone in and put pedestrian lights in above everyone to kind of give it, you know, just that little bit more like friendly, welcoming feel. And go ahead and scroll down. And even closer to home, Kannapolis, where they've gone back in and redone their downtown. They've kind of given it a little bit interesting on the zigzag with the planters, just to mix up or kind of break up the street a little bit. They've gone back in and added raised planting islands. That could be an example of, you know, interactivity, you know, just because it's not just visually appealing, but also with that raised planting bed, those walls can also act as a seating wall. So it does provide some type of like public furniture kind of embedded. Jay, if you could scroll on down. Or really even allow for any type of, you know, public engagement opportunity, kind of like Discovery Place in Uptown. I know it's been there a while, like some of those events or those spaces have been in Uptown for a while, but I know like when I first saw them, I probably spent like 30 minutes just like speaking into the little microphone and going back and forth with some of my friends. Jay, you can scroll to the next one. Or even like providing public art opportunities within the public right of way. You know, like we may not get a Banksy or a big giant blue bear in any of the districts, but I think what's important to remember with the entertainment district in particular is, you know, this is an urban area for us. So it's kind of, you have those that public right of way, kind of like in downtown where everything's mixed and mingled, but then you also still have like the private space. And so it's, how can we enhance that public space to make it feel more welcoming? Not just rather a place that looks nice, but also a place to be. That kind of concludes the staff update. I know at the last meeting, we did have some general direction, but I guess we're really just looking for more of a discussion along, what it is that we're looking for to activate these areas in the entertainment district, potentially in a way before, or I guess to just allow a little bit more development, kind of view it on a case by case basis when we're looking at like commercial detail.
Commissioner Tufano.
Thank you, Darren. I have a concern, perhaps maybe you could address it. If this text amendment goes through, then we, as you say, on a case by case basis. So we have the possibility of individual developers coming in and providing street level retail space on a small scale, much smaller than what we would have anticipated on the whole ENT as the overall concept. So let's say that we just had a series of developers come in over a period of time in this particular district, overlay district, and they're putting in this minimal amount or whatever the board decides on a case by case basis. There's a potential that I see that the ENT district would never have a major facility of any kind. Can you help me alleviate that concern?
Right. So, it's one of the things that we mentioned in the 5:30 meeting. The planning for the ENT district really began, back in like 1999. So we've been going on for about 20 years. We do have several small area plans. I think one of the benefits that we would see with going on the case by case basis is we do have that protection of conditional zoning. The small area plans also highlight major routes within the ENT district and the small area plan. So we've got the Independence Point Parkway extension. That's envisioned as being a major future right of way. And then we've also got a east-west road that stretches from East End or Sportsplex Parkway back through the center of the area into, I believe it is back into Crestdale Road. So, when we're going back through and looking at it, that's kind of one of the things where we're viewing it on a case by case basis. So anything that's in that area, that's really where we want to maybe preserve land in these larger rezonings for like some type of larger central entertainment building versus coming back in and doing the smaller storefronts. Another thing to keep in mind when we're talking about the ENT overlay is also really depends on where we're talking. Just location is extremely important. We do have proposed light rail in that area. So that would be going on the future Independence Point Parkway. But then we also have existing commercial spaces along Matthews Mint Hill and Independence, or the existing US 74. And so there are commercial spaces there. Right now, those are by right developments. And so we'd really be looking for anything to get that conditional zoning. We'd be really looking for anything that's in that R15. And so kind of in those major areas.
But I didn't hear addressing the very high probability that there would never be a major facility in the ENT district if this text amendment were approved. Is that a valid assumption?
That there would never be one? I mean,
No,
it's kind of
I'm just saying the high probability that there wouldn't be one if these individual developers came in with some minimal amount of retail space that they were allowed to have.
Commissioner Tufano, to be clear, are you asking for a major entertainment venue or something like that?
No, I'm just,
I'm not understanding your
I'm
question.
I'm trying to make a decision whether or not this text amendment is going to have a long-term negative impact on the ENT district on a case-by-case basis by not forcing a developer to provide a major facility in that area. So that's my concern.
Okay, so I think what's important to remember, right now we have two rezonings that are currently going through. We'll hear from, we'll touch on each of those a bit later tonight. Both of these are R15 to entertainment districts. And right now there are two properties being developed by two different applicants. They are larger applicants. They're going in, or a few of them are going in the proposed smaller buildings. But since these are conditional zonings, this is really where it would be fall under the board to make sure you're getting the size development that that you or the town are looking for. So, potentially anything that's closer or around those Silverline or the proposed Silverline developments, or any like high pedestrian planned corridor through the area. That's really where we need to focus on making sure that we're getting the things that we want, and not just, putting in like an apartment building, or maybe putting in like standalone commercial space, but really focusing in on what type of facilities that we would like to see in the future.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Before we go to Commissioner Urban, I mean, this ask just seems so incredibly vague. I think we need more work. I couldn't support this. I mean, are we coming up with a punch list of possible uses? Is that what the desire is? Is that what the staff ask, is to come up with a punch list of possible uses that could be an activation of a non-residential area?
Right. So I think, and I did write this into the staff recommendation that we were kind of looking at it to go back for a little bit more work, but I think what we would end up forming in an ideal world would be some type of template to work off of. So making sure we're getting a lot of these like street activation elements, but also writing it into the UDO so that we're not 100% relied on it on a condition by condition or a conditional district basis. So the case by case basis, but also a certain level of standards in case, there is some business highway in the overlay district. So if there is any potential redevelopment over there or on those parcels, we could get some type of street activation for those. Right. So I think it would be a little bit like you were saying, go back through making like some type of template refinement.
Yeah, the feedback that I know that I'm receiving, and I think every person on this dais is receiving as an elected official, is that we want something other than just residential uses on this property. We want some entertainment in our entertainment district. Commissioner Urban.
So I think to piggyback a little bit on Commissioner Tofano's, as a case by case basis, if you're looking for the big idea, you push for the big idea. I think in some respects, the big idea is already there. It's called the Sportsplex. Should everything else fall through, you still have the Sportsplex. And I'm reminded of 6th Street in Austin, Texas, and South Congress in Austin, Texas. Organically grown, small mom and pop operations along those streets, but it piggybacks on the fact that they have a large park structure within walking distance to those items. And then I also think about Greenville, which has the park at the end of the streets, which are all those sort of mom and pop infill situations. I think to go to Mayor Higdon's point, though, sort of a checklist, so to speak, but I'm more I don't see the wording like entertainment venues. I don't see the wording hospitality. I don't see the wording food service. I don't see those things that are all related to sort of energized, active retail things in this piece. And I'd like to I would offer or raise up to the board is in a lot of jurisdictions, I think we do it as well here, is there's the listing. Well, you've got public plazas, you've got, open space, outdoor dining areas, you've got brick pavers, this and this. And there's 10 items and it says, we want you to come back to the table with a minimum of 6 of these items. So that's the first threshold which they have to pass. And then they got to run the gauntlet of the board on the case by case basis. So I think having that list would be very, very helpful, because I think everybody on the board is saying we want more entertainment venue type elements, more hospitality, more food service. We don't be sensitive to downtown, but downtown is limited in space. And it would be different. Maybe there would be some sports related activities from that standpoint. And so a developer can look at it and say, oh, well, there's 10 things I've got to shoot for. Which of those 10 things I want to target? Now, I do know, and I think most of the board knows, that in phase 2 of the Wyatt Dixon proposal, there are components for a big idea. So I'm very hopeful that that big idea is going to come along. But in the interim, I think if we're talking a text amendment, we know it applies for the entire area. We need to have that ability to look at the primary street would probably have certain elements in it that the secondary street wouldn't have. So that guy's top 6 would be different than the primary street's top 6. But you just run that gamut of them all and spell it out. That would be my offering, as opposed to sort of some, altruistic mission statement. It's sort of like, hey, you want to be here? Here are the 10 items we're looking for. You got to accomplish 6 or 7 of these items. And then on a case by case basis, the board's going to give it the smell test and then add on to it as we see fit.
Darren nodded his head. So, okay. Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
I guess I want to take a step back, and maybe there's a question for Jay has there been any research into other communities have tried to do something like an ENT district? I mean, what have they done to help activate that? Has there been any research, or there's any examples? I know Commissioner Urban brought up, Austin, Texas and Greenville, but, like a community like us, we're near a big metropolitan area, but we're not. So is there any example you can give us of that?
So that's a good point to bring up. Most entertainment districts are in larger cities. They're around major sports facilities and larger downtowns like Charlotte. So what we're doing is a little bit unique. What we want to avoid is rows of empty storefronts. There are municipalities around the country that have instituted a mandatory ground floor retail requirement. As much as I'm a mixed use person, if you put it on the wrong street in the wrong place, rows of vacant storefronts also aren't a good look. So I think when we talk about primary and secondary streets, we want to make sure, yes, we have ground floor retail activation, but we want it to be successful. We don't want to build vacant storefronts that can't be activated. So I think the Commissioner Urban's point about stimulating first floor use in areas that maybe it's a list of 8 or 10 items. And Darren had, I thought, some great examples of public art and plazas that can activate the street without being actual commercial space. But at the same time, using conditional zoning and its full potential to really kind of curate what this district's going to be, because I think it needs critical mass. It needs a central place. And, streets like Sports Parkway are kind of the secondary avenues, but also they carry a lot of traffic in and out. And I think they can ultimately one day support, those retail uses. I know that was kind of a long-winded. I wish there were an example that I could take you to in Google Maps and say, this is how they did it, but there's not a great example. But
Well, and I kind of a follow-up too, is I've noticed this in uptown Charlotte, there's be a big apartment building built and it's storefronts and they stay empty for forever. They're always for lease. What can we do? There's worry, okay, what if Commissioner Tavano said, what if no one even comes to us, or it's smaller facilities? What can the town do to outreach to entertainment folks? I'm trying to think of like a museum or something that would be considered entertainment. What can we do to be active in that and reaching out to those folks who maybe wouldn't know about it?
I think, partnerships, maybe conversations with Arts and Science Council, like, a lot of it's economic development, and we don't really have an economic development person on staff, but who's going to do recruitment? Is it on the developer? Do we partner more with the developer to look at, what those potential uses are? Could they carve out space, a 10,000 square foot space that could be like a museum facility or art facility or something?
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just another comment for me to be clear. I think the entertainment district has to have more than, open outdoor spaces, zigzagging sidewalks and public art. I want some commercial stuff there, some dining opportunities, etc. And I still, on occasion, I guess I'm old, but on occasion I'll do something that I did with my parents when I was a child, and my wife and I will go out on a Sunday afternoon for a drive, as long as gas doesn't get too high. And there's plenty of communities around here that are small towns that have very active downtown areas. They're not dried up and gone. They're doing very well, and they're close to us. They're counties nearby. So I don't buy that, I know we don't want to mandate massive commercial spaces, but it can be done because other communities have done it. And there are commercial opportunities that draw lots of people, and I think we all know what those are. So as much as I appreciate the open areas and stuff like that, I would like to see some stores and some things that people can go do and participate in and eat. And Commissioner Urban.
I guess to add on to that, we were talking about primary roads, secondary roads. Maybe if we were able to dissect the entertainment complex a little bit better from the planning aspect of it to decide which streets food service and hospitality has to definitely be on, and which streets that sort of secondary elements of support would be on. And then maybe there's a C category and a D category. And so there's sticks and carrots in this arrangement. If you're on A, you're going to be providing a commercial event venue space. If you're on C, a dry cleaners is okay, so to speak, or an insurance agent or something but I think we need to be very cognizant of that, because we're not going to be able to take this idea and spread it across the blanket all the way. We're going to have to pick our poison, our best opportunity, not our poison, our best opportunity, drive that home. And over time, organically, street B will get driven out by A, and B will become A, and then C will become B. And that's just the nature of how things go.
So I have to ask this follow-up clarification. I mentioned this back in November, but just to reiterate, downtown Matthews for the past 25 years has had a 50% first floor retail requirement in the heart of downtown. So at least 50% of the ground floor of all buildings has to be devoted to non-residential. Are you all looking for something that prescriptive, or are you still okay with this a la carte? Is it 50% of every facade when you look down at each building, or are you okay with this a la carte approach where there could be a combination of storefronts and plazas? I think that would help us as we go back and work with the developer to better understand.
I think it could be aspirational. We could say, yeah, we would like to have, it wouldn't have to be necessarily a hard line in the sand, but
okay,
we would prefer to have X percentage of commercial. I think we could do something like that. I don't think we're ready to vote on this tonight. I don't know what others think, but Commissioner Whitley, you have a comment?
well, it's just,
Yes, I did. Thank you. I mentioned this about 2 months ago. And we talked about entertainment and we do have the sports complex, but also have the bowling alley there. So we can't leave that out. That is a sort of entertainment. But when you think about this area of the entertainment, and I saw this very interesting, and I participated when I was in Hawaii. I mentioned this to y'all then. There was an area that was set up with chairs. There was vendors, not a food truck vendors, but there was tent vendors every Monday night in the entertainment area where people could come out, walk. They can test different foods. There were about 10 different tents. But there was music, entertainment, but people that was in the restaurants could sit outside but it drew every Monday night different vendor, not food truck, but they were tent. They come set up about 4:30 and they went from 5 o'clock to about 9. But it drew a lot of people in that downtown Hawaii to that area. And I mean, people look for it every Monday night, but it was just a nice place to gather with kids, and a lot of kids that they had an area where they could run around and play. And it was just a good, and I would like to see something in that area. I know we got the soccer fields and but this is just a place. It don't have to be every week, but just once a week, the people in those apartments know that it's there. They could bring their kids out, but other people could drive and walk and be there as well too in parking. And so I think I would like to see something like that. But one thing I did want to make sure that people have an opportunity somewhere they can sit down, not just walk and go, but every now and then that you want to sit. And they had some long concrete benches or something and some chairs that was on the sidewalk where people could sit down as well too, and let the kids run, but the parents could sit there as well too. But I think that would be a great drawer of entertainment in the area if we could do something like that. And I know the vendors would love to come and put off their food or whatever they had to show off, and they charge for it. But they sold out and ran out a lot of different food that was sold out very quickly, but that's my 2 cents.
So I misspoke. I realize it's a public hearing and we're not voting tonight. What I meant to say was we're not going to come to a consensus tonight. This is a very detailed, lot of things to consider. Is anybody on the planning board? Do you have any questions for staff regarding this? I'm sorry, Commissioner Gardner.
I think, you know, as we talk about this, we kind of keep running around in circles. And maybe need to rein it back in a little bit, because we started out with this 40,000 square foot area. Decided that that was probably not a great approach to take with the entertainment district. And so then we decided, well, maybe there's something more conditional. And maybe I'm summarizing this incorrectly, so feel free to correct me. So, you know, now we have this recommended version that's a little more subjective. And we're saying we want to go back to something more prescriptive. So maybe something in between. I think what we're missing here is that as we talk about this, a lot of these things, like in the entertainment district, small area plan, there is a map of projected major roads. And so maybe, you know, and there are lists of uses and what's allowed by right, what's allowed by prescribed conditions. So maybe what we need to do is look at that document and whittle it down so that we can get back to giving the planning department something more to go on besides, you know, just throwing noodles at the wall and coming back to us and us saying, well, that's not quite it. You know, I think somehow we have to come up with our own vision, which is what I was hoping we would come up with when we had our meeting about this, so that they have a good idea of what we're looking for, and we have as a board a better focus on to give them.
Those are fair points. I would suggest that perhaps we need another 5:30 meeting to discuss that. Is anybody else on the board, this board, have a question for staff? Does anybody in the planning board have a question for staff? All right, I understand the applicant has a presentation, Mr. Carmichael. You gonna straighten all this out?
Sure, I'm happy to try. Thank y'all. I'm John Carmichael here on behalf of the applicant. Jay, I think we have y'all, Jay and Darren have gone through a lot of it, so I'll be brief. And like, we're happy to work with you in any form or fashion to try to get to a point that you're comfortable with. I've got Jason Moguzuki with the NRP group with me tonight. So this is just the current ordinance that requires up, at least 40,000 square feet of commercial space to be under construction or completed with the entire district before you exceed 600 dwelling units. I don't think anybody in this room thinks 40,000 square feet of commercial space is close to being sufficient in the entire entertainment district. And so that was a number that was just, I guess, agreed upon some years ago. We then proposed, it didn't come before the board, but in working with staff, more of a pro rata basis for different development projects, that the 40,000 square foot requirement wouldn't apply if you provided 5% affordable dwelling units and a minimum of 50 square feet of commercial space per dwelling unit. And talking with Jane Darren, that is kind of determined that maybe that's not the way to go. So then we came up with this, and I know it's not perfect, and we're certainly appreciate the comments tonight. This was just would allow what you would anyway through the conditional rezoning process. I mean, I guess I won't read that to you. I think that we're happy to do whatever you want to come up with a list and have a minimum of, I've seen that before in ordinances, but there is a page in the small area plan that has the major streets, but there could be different major streets when you have a conditional plan. And so I think it's hard, at least it's hard for me, to come up with a written text that can just apply across the board. And that's why I think it's probably better, in my humble opinion, to do it through the conditional rezoning process, because then you'll have a real plan with real streets. and you can decide where the commercial uses need to go and if they need to be standalone or in a mixed use building. But here again, we'll do whatever the board, the planning board and the planning staff want us to do, and we're happy to continue to work on this. And we're happy to answer questions.
Just I comment again, if I go back to the suggested language, it's just so squishy.
Oh, it's
and
totally squishy.
Vague and just
Yeah.
wide open. It doesn't really say a whole lot of anything to me. I mean,
No, I don't disagree with you. And it says, it just states what you can do already.
Commissioner Tufano.
Mr. Carmichael, thank you. I'm assuming that your project is totally contingent upon the text amendment being passed. Is that correct?
The NRP project is because right now there's no commercial space existing in ENT. And this rezoning is on the agenda tonight, Commissioner Tufano, but it would proffer a minimum of 18,850 square feet of commercial and a maximum of 20. So it would not meet that 40,000 square foot threshold. Yes, sir.
Can you, I know you probably don't have this number off the top of your head, but maybe somebody in your group does. What is the total square footage of your dwellings within that project?
I'd have to, I can get
Yeah.
that for you.
Yeah.
I think we need to wait to the next item to discuss this and then.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'll talk to the team and ask them, see if we can get that number for you real quick. About 300,000.
Okay, does anybody on the board, town board, have a question for Mr. Carmichael beyond Commissioner Tufano and myself? A comment? Commissioner Urban?
I mean, but John, is it really, I know you want to do the text amendment, but the way it sounds like it's really more the onus of the board and staff creating the text than it is you. I mean, I know you're out there saying, we can help you kind of thing, but unless you heard these cats, you're not going to be able to get anywhere. So it's to Renee's point of 530 and dissecting what are the priorities, secondary, tertiary, et cetera, and how that should be laid out is the only time we can give him direction. Otherwise, you're going to write the text amendment is going to favor you. I mean, I understand.
Well,
that.
I'm just off.
You
well-
wouldn't do that, John.
No, well, of course not.
Well, I mean, I guess what I meant by that, Commissioner Urban, is I'm happy to provide whatever assistance.
Well, sure,
Not that you
sure.
need it, because you've got Jay and Darren, but we
But enough has been
drafted text
developed
amendments.
on paper between Wyatt Dixon and what you've shown and what staff has seen that we can really begin to prognosticate exactly what are the primary streets running through this project, through this area, and secondary streets. I mean, unless someone came in and just tossed the whole thing in the air, we pretty much know why it's set the catalyst up for everything. And you guys are sort of following off of that.
That's right.
Jay and staff should be able to point to us and say, with 99% probability, these two streets are our primary ones and these are the secondary ones, and then we could set up for that.
Well, that's part of the rationale behind me saying I think it's easier in the context of the conditional rezoning because
Because you see it.
because you see it.
Yes.
And then you can say, look, I think it should go here, or maybe this street should be a primary street. Maybe it shouldn't be. I mean, it's just, I think it's more of a visual process necessarily than a written process.
Correct. Thank you.
Just my opinion. There's a written component to it though, obviously. Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
Well, I think what my concern is, I think we need to have a 5:30 meeting. We need to whittle down what we're really looking for, but then we're also holding up the developers. So I guess the question is, when could we have a 5:30 meeting so we don't keep kicking the can down the road? Because it feels like we've talked in circles for 2 months now. So I guess it's a question.
I don't know what the rules are for 5:30, and I'm not trying to interject myself where I shouldn't. I know there's one. I'd say I know. It's my understanding there's one the 23rd of January, I thought, that Mr. Dixon would be a part of, but it seems like these all kind of are part of the same ball of wax in some sense. Are we allowed to attend those sorts of
Wouldn't that
things?
break the public hearing because of, I guess that's. So
Okay.
we'd be fine to do that. But I think.
Yeah, I don't know that we would be necessarily asking for a lot of active participation.
Oh, no, just listening.
Yeah, yeah.
We could write.
I just don't want to string them along as we're kind of talking in circles up here for the last few months. So let's get something on the books is my 2 cents.
The problem is this tees up all the angst that's been on the board. And without that being resolved, I would not be able to make a call on the next supposed petition. at
That's what
all.
I'm saying. That's why we need to
Yeah.
get that figured out. I think that's the
And-
crux
and
of
it's-
everything. That needs to be the priority.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, we'll work with staff to have a meeting as soon as possible, and it will be an open meeting and you can certainly participate.
Thank you.
Commissioner Garner.
Um,
or
a-
Ken.
not a question for you, John, but for Jay, I guess. In the process, in the rezoning process, and when somebody comes to you and says that they're interested in the ENT district, do you go through the small area plan with them? Is it a small area plan or is it yeah, do you go through the small area plan and say, this is the intention of that space? And then if you're, I know that you often vet projects that just don't fit.
Right.
And so are you looking at that saying, this does not fit the intention of that space? And so here, read this plan and come back to us with something that works better.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's part of our land use code as we meet with potential developers. We're obviously going over the land development codes and our long-term planning. And honestly, the fact that there is commercial space here, that's a reflection of feedback from staff that this needs to be a more mixed use in nature project. We've had developers that were purely residential look at land there from time to time, build to rent single family. We've seen a lot of proposals out there that quite frankly, we said this just isn't the fit we're looking for in this district.
And so once they meet the criteria that we're looking for in this district, the ordinance is a reflection of that, right? They're kind of tied together in a like a footnote or something. If you're reading the ordinance, then you're going to go to the small area plan and read more in depth to see if it's meeting what the intention of the small area plan.
Right. So we've got the area plan, we've got the zoning district itself that has requirements, and we also have the overlay district. So we've got one policy document and two regulatory pieces of the UDO that give guidance for those prospective developers.
So I guess what I'm thinking is that as we talk about this, we want to fit everything into one paragraph, when really we're making a summary statement that ties into other documents that fill out those lists and notes and criteria that we're supposed to meet. So we don't have to pin it down so succinctly. We just have to make a statement that refers to these other documents. And I think that frees us up as a board to have to have room for some of that squishiness that's in this, and maybe taking the three that we've seen, the original plus the two since then, and we could come up with something much more easily than trying to write an ordinance as a board.
Yeah, for me, at the end of the day, I just want to make sure we don't continue to build 100% residential in this area. That's what I want to address. That's what we have to address.
Well, I think that's the small area plan really spells that out. And so, maybe that's what our 530 is understanding what the small area plan says, and then taking just a couple of sentences and putting that into the ordinance.
Okay, other comments from the town board about the planning board for the Mr. Carmichael? You guys have anything? Anybody in the audience care to make a comment regarding this petition? Mr. McBride? Go up to the podium, please, sir. Yeah, please also give us your address, Mr. McBride.
Oh, okay. Vice McBride, 14202 Honeysuckle Ridge, Matthews. in relation to, I'm not familiar with the designated entertainment plazas that Matthews has a problem of trying to retain old town, small town designation. If you're interested in having entertainment places, I went through Mint Hill the other day and they have really fantastically changed. I don't know who's doing their planning, but they've got parking in the rear. They've got the businesses up at the street. I would move them back away from the street and put in more seating, serving, eating areas. Another thing is that the streets in Matthews do not have signs, designated street signs, big ones that even I can read. Get the street sign out there so people will not get lost. Also, you need to incorporate the links. I was in Florida, Palm Beach County, and I heard what problems that their links was having. So I'm familiar with what will occur here. You need to either decide you want to be an old town or you want to be an entertainment town that people come. You're going to have to destroy some houses, old houses. Make Monroe Road your gateway to Matthews. You come through the center of Matthews. Those houses along Monroe Road will have to be demolished. Behind them, there is enough room in the railroad tracks to have your parking and have your building facilities on the street with people sitting, eating, and welcoming people in for entertainment.
Thank you, sir.
Right.
Would anybody else in the audience tonight like to speak regarding this petition? Seeing none, Maureen, do we have anybody online? Becky, when can we have a 5:30 meeting to discuss this? I hate to put you on the spot, but.
I'd like to confer with staff. We had a few things that we were trying to fit into the next meeting. And so I think we need to strategize about how best to deploy our available 5:30s, and we can email the board and let them know. So there's a potential it could be in 2 weeks, but it may need to be later.
Okay, we do need to continue this public hearing. The February 13th, can we shoot for that, Becky? Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we continue this until the February 13th meeting.
Second.
A motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, a second by Commissioner Urban. All in favor? All opposed? That passed unanimously. We'll go to the next one. Zoning application 2022-766. ENT NRP Group to change the zoning on that certain property from R15 to ENT on that certain property designated as 11330 Brigman Road and further identified as tax parcel 215-08143. This was continued from our October 10th meeting. Mr. Hallman.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is for Matthews Lofts. This is the property located on Sportsplex Parkway in the ENT zoning district. Jay, could you go to the next, or hang on.
Jay, because of the previous action, do we need to just go ahead and continue this one, or do we want to go ahead and do the staff presentation tonight? Okay.
Right, so this property, this is 1133 or 11330 Brigman Road. This is part of the Brigman property. The current zoning is R15. Proposed zoning is ENT. It is in the ENT overlay. Currently, it is vacant. Right now, they are proposing multifamily residential and commercial space on the property. Applicant is proposing to change from R15 to ENT. So currently, they are proposing 377 dwelling units located on the site. And they are proposing 18,850 square feet of commercial space as part of that. Just an overview of the existing conditions. So it is this property located at the corner of Brigman and Sports Park, the Sportsplex Parkway Road. It is about 15 acres in size. Right now, it is all wooded. There's a small creek in the back. You can't really see it on the screen, but there is a stream back there. Previously, there's been no zoning action on it. Right, so this is the proposed site plan for the site. So again, we have the project mainly fronting Sports Parkway. We do have a larger structure located on site. So this would be the first case of structured parking being located in Matthews. I believe it is a 3-story parking deck. Is that correct? Or 4-story parking deck. The actual building sizes. Larger apartment building, it does butt up against what the main sports stadium or main soccer stadium in the Sportsplex. And Jay, could you click on the full screen for the PDF? Oh, you're fine. Right, and then we do have the landscaping plan noted here as well. So one of the things to note, originally when this came in, there was not structured parking located on site. It was a series of smaller buildings, much like we see over here, closer to the existing intersection. But it really never was able to, with that series of smaller buildings, it never kind of created that urban form, that urban feel that we were looking for in the entertainment district. And so what they've really come back with is something that kind of provides that. So it's kind of, it does like create a self-contained block. And it also helps to address that. In the rear back here in this corner, there are terraces as well. So that is an extra element that it kind of adds to. I'm trying to think if there are any, but most of, if not all of the internal street networkings, they are all 10-foot multi-use paths. So that is located along Sports Parkway. They'll be going back in for that 5-foot sidewalk that's there existing, upgrading that. All of the internal streets and private streets. And then they're also making connections back into the existing greenway over in the Sportsplex. And then along Brigman Road, we'll also be getting it'll be an outside of the right-of-way path as part of our downtown loop, but it will cut through the woods, and there'll be a small, like, raised walkway that kind of goes back through some wetlands in that area. Right, so this is building 1. So this would be the larger building located on site. We do have new elevations. So this would be from the north side. So this would be looking from the new public right-of-way that intersects Sports Parkway. And then the east side, this would be the view from Sports Parkway. And then the south side, this would be looking from the Sportsplex back into the development. And then the side opposite of Sports Parkway. This would be the mixed use building. So commercial first floor and residential on the next 3 floors. Again, just kind of looking at it. So from the south, we're looking in from Sports Parkway side or that new street. This would be the area of main street level activity. Looking back from the west, this would be looking from the Brigman bowling or the Brigman property or the bowling alley property. They also have views from Sports Parkway and the north side, which there would be a little alleyway in between the 2 buildings. And then again, this is the northernmost building, so it would just be residential. And then just kind of some notes on the entertainment district small area plan. I know we've talked a lot about this, so we'll just kind of run through some of them. But you know, a lot of the guiding principles are we are looking for that urban scale neighborhood, mixed use development, transit hub, walkable, unique identity. Right now, the proposal is generally consistent with those. Another thing that does come out of the ENT small area plan is, you know, some of those building sizes. So we are looking for like townhome apartments, 3 to 4 stories, high density residential buildings. So 6 to 7 stories. Parking built in 1 to 2 stories, vertical mixed use, first floor commercial. It is checking a lot of these boxes that our small area plan has proposed. This is a little bit older before they went back. So there are a handful of additional units. Generally, though, the project would add at least 120 students to the system or the CMS system.
Darren,
Mhm.
could you go back to the previous slide, please? I just noticed that the school impact says without mobiles. Do we have one with mobiles?
Yes, so, or uh,
If we don't have that
Right.
information, this kind of exaggerates the, yeah.
I don't
Commissioner
think
Garner?
they provide us the number of mobiles. It's always the same chart, but when you see, Matthews Elementary has they have one giant mobile unit and I would say it has 10 classrooms in it, maybe 8. So when you see 68, that's 2 classrooms plus X number of students from this one project.
I don't know. I think as a discussion for another day, we should talk to CMS and see if we can get provided that information. You have follow up?
If it's appropriate to say it, I mean, because that number to me is is shocking to add 2 classrooms to
No,
an elementary school at this, out of one project. Students that live in the neighborhood behind Town Hall go to Mint Hill Elementary. They don't go to Matthews Elementary. And so it's odd to me that these students would go to Matthews Elementary when they're closer to Mint Hill Elementary than the ones behind us. So I think that's a discussion to have, with CMS.
I mean, none of us up here are fans of mobiles, but we need to have accurate data. Otherwise, it's kind of, I don't know how you make an informed decision with not knowing how many.
Well, I think what they're saying is the school as it's built is already over capacity and they can continue to add mobile classrooms.
Understand.
And so that 21% over 100% is mobile classrooms now.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it, but I don't know. I still think we need to ask that question to CMS.
we can follow up with CMS about that. Right, just a few notes from some of the departments. So our main focus as the planning department right now is just really getting that street network right. It is one-sided, but we've kind of seen a few other maps from the small area plan. It's really making sure we're getting that street connectivity. So making sure that we're getting some type of cross connectivity back into the bowling alley site, back over to the rest of the Brigman property on the other side of the bridge. They have provided that in some capacity. Maybe there's a little bit more opportunity, like maybe potentially looking at like an easement or something. And then also just being mindful of the Silver Line and light rail station around the project.
Does no comment and no concern mean the same thing?
It does. It's just the main difference comes from a few years of copying and pasting from
Okay, great.
various.
I just want to make sure our police and fire said, no, we don't care to comment. Thanks. So
Right.
they have reviewed it and they have no concerns, right?
Yes, this has been the DRC. Public Works did provide comment. So one of the comments from Public Works was to provide a micro transit pickup and drop off area coordinated with CATS. So they have actually, or the applicant is looking to provide that on site. This is actually a nice concept. So it's kind of just a pull in, pull out area that can be used by Uber or Lyft drivers, but it can also be coordinated with CATS in their bus system. So if someone just needs like a van pickup, they can make a call and the van, like a dedicated bus or van, has somewhere to come and pick them up from. And that would also, utilize on street area. So there wouldn't be any, it would just be, everything would be right up by the road. And then also potentially placing some of the required bike parking inside of the parking deck. Placing it inside the parking deck would provide, it would take it outside of the right of way. So it also provides some shelter from the elements. Not surprisingly, there were a lot of recommendations from the TIA. This included installing a traffic signal on Independence Point Parkway and Matthews Mint Hill Road. At the Matthews Mint Hill Road and Brigman Road intersection, extending the westbound lanes to provide additional storage, providing additional storage in the turn lane or the southbound turn lanes. On US, we've also have a recommendation to construct a pedestrian signal and high visibility crosswalk. So for the high school, there is currently a lot of foot traffic that crosses 74. And so again, one of the recommendations to come out of this is this would be a signalized pedestrian crossing across 74 at Matthews Mint Hill. We have construction access. A lot of these 10-foot sidewalk paths, they have been shown on the site plan. Activity. Oh, thank you. In the TIA discussions as well, there is the possibility for also the construction of a mini roundabout at Brigman Road and Sports Parkway. And so at that intersection, it would really tie back into where it continues back into Elevation Church, but also it would lead back up into that kind of private alley that's beside the AutoZone. I think typically they get used by a lot of cut through traffic, trying to get back out on the 74.
But that is private. I was going to ask that question.
Right, correct. That is private. So it would just tie back into where their current driveway entrance. There has been some discussion from NCDOT about potentially maybe working some of that area back in with some future plans. So we'll follow up at a later date about that. So this project also went before the TAC, so our Traffic Advisory Committee, and they did provide some recommendation from the TIAs, such as adding the crosswalk on Matthews Mint Hill Road across 74. They were in favor of that. Providing a 10-foot multi-use path on the site's frontage side on Brigman Road and Sports Parkway. The applicant has provided that. The TAC also made the recommendation that came from staff about, that came from Public Works about adding additional northbound lanes through Matthews Mint Hill over 74 to help increase the amount of through traffic flow. Right now on Matthews Mint Hill Road, there's a good bit of backup in the afternoons. And so that extra through lane that should help alleviate a lot of the congestion from that backup. I did say that, right, Susan? Okay. All right, just had to verify. That concludes the staff report. Are there any questions? And then
Commissioner Whitley.
Darren, on this additional crosswalk to Matthews Mint Hill Road across US 74, isn't DOT planning on building a bridge on Matthews Mint Hill Road to go over top of 74?
correct. So
Would that not take care of what you're speaking of there?
right. So the crosswalk would be interim relief until NCDOT moves forward with construction of the flyover bridge for Matthews Mint Hill Road. So really what we would just be looking for would be, imagine in the median, there would be some type of like pet island stop, and really just getting some type of signal in there to let people know when it is safe to cross 74. That can be a busy street, and helping signalize that could provide some safety.
Yeah, I see them try to cross that all the time.
Dangerous.
Just pick a chance.
Mm. But correct, ultimately, we would be hopeful to get some pedestrian connections with any type of bridge going over 74 in the future.
Thank you.
I just have a comment regarding the indoor parking space for bicycles. And then we have some cyclists in the audience, Jim Johnson and some others. And when my son was a student at Chapel Hill, he really appreciated that. You can imagine if you have to park your main mode of getting around out in the elements all the time. So it's nice to have an indoor space, and those spots were really coveted if you could park it inside the parking deck and lock it up, right? Rather than tie your bike to a tree out in the rain somewhere. So that's great. I'm seeing more and more people use bicycles to get around town. So that's a good amenity. Any other questions from this board or Darren? Anybody from the planning board? Howie?
Darren, is there any below market housing part of this 300 units? I know we hear repeatedly 5% and 80% AMI, which at least for me is a big concern. 80% AMI does nothing for anybody. And 5% of these units even offered would be 15 units by that, right? And so if that included in the structure, that's not even on the table.
Right. So just to go back to the text amendment that we heard a bit ago, this is the same applicant that proposed that text amendment. There was one version of the text amendment that would have allowed for, or that would have required affordable housing to be implemented as part of the project. I don't believe that we're.
ENT, but is there been any proposal for it or not? That's my question. And I take it from what you're answering, Mr. Carmack can certainly answer.
Right. The applicant will follow up.
Mr. Carmichael, do you have a presentation tonight? Want the whole crew with you.
Well, in case there are any questions, we certainly want to be able to answer them for you. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the town board and the planning board, I'm John Carmichael on behalf of the applicant, the NRP group. With me tonight, we've got Hattie Pavleko-Reeder with Land Design, Jason Mokuzuki with NRP Group, Andrew Eagle with Ramey Kemp, and Paul Sekelo of Ratio Design. Paul's the architect, and he'll address you shortly. So as Darren said, the site contains just over 15 acres. It's located at the southwest corner of the intersection of Brigman Road and Sports Parkway. The site's located immediately to the north of the Sportsplex. To the west of the site is the bowling alley. Further to the west is the Briley development and the proposed Silver Line. To the east of the site is Elevation Church. And once again, to the south of the site is the Sportsplex. And then this is undeveloped land to the west of the site. In terms of the zoning, the site's currently zoned R15, which is, as you know, is a single family zoning district. To the south, Sportsplex is zoned ENT. To the north, you've got Business Highway and then ENT. To the west, you've got R15 and ENT. This is the Briley development. And then to the east, you've got R15, and Elevation Church is actually your old shopping center district, B1 SCD. A little further to the northeast is Business Highway. And so the request is to rezone the site to the ENT zoning district to accommodate a mixed-use development that would contain a maximum of 377 multifamily units and a minimum of, this says 750, but it's actually been up to 850, a minimum of 18,850 square feet of commercial use and a maximum of 20,000 square feet of commercial uses. A minimum of 5% of the dwelling units that are constructed on the site would maintain rents that are income restricted to households earning 80% or less of the area median income for a period of not less than 15 years. And this is a note that's on the rezoning plan. So this is the site plan. It's oriented a little different than Darren's. This is north to south, and this is how you would see it. Once again, this is Sports Parkway. Brigman Road is up here, as is Matthews Mint Hill. This is the bowling alley. You can see the edge of the Briley. And then this is Elevation Church here. The site would be accessed from Sports Parkway by two new streets, a public street that would go in an east-west direction, and a private street to the south here. The public street would have parallel on-street parking. There's existing on-street parking adjacent to the site on Sports Parkway. There would be some parking here off the private street as well. You would access the parking lot to the rear of the northerly buildings from the new public street. Oops, I'm sorry, that was wrong. So there are three buildings. The northerly building would be 4 stories in height and be a residential building. The middle building would also be 4 stories in height. The ground floor would contain commercial uses. The top floors would have residential units. And the southernmost building, the larger building, would wrap a 4-story parking structure. The maximum height of this building would be 4 stories along Sports Parkway, and then 5 stories as you go towards the private street to the west. And this is designated on the rezoning plan as building 3, 2, and 1. So once again, the commercial uses will be here in the middle building, which is designated as building 2. There would be an outdoor plaza area here in front of building 2 along the new public street. Likewise, there would be an outdoor plaza area here in front of building 3 along the new public street as well. And the applicant, as Darren mentioned, would install a 10-foot wide multi-use path along the site's frontage on Sports Parkway and along Brigman Road. The new public street would have 10-foot wide multi-use path on both sides as well. There would be a greenway trail along the western boundary and along the south here. This greenway trail would connect to an existing trail on the Sportsplex. There would be a dog park and a public amenity here on the west side of this private street. There would be a sports court area or interior courtyard area here that would have a swimming pool. And then there would be an outdoor terraced area here that would be an outdoor amenity. The fitness and the club and the office for the multifamily development would be here, located along the site's frontage, located along building 3's frontage on the new public street. Let's see. There would be green spaces located throughout the site, as you can see. A lot of green space here to the west of the private street. The applicant would obtain Hawk certification for the open space areas and the tree save areas. This development would be located in close proximity to the Silver Line, the proposed Silver Line light rail station. It would be an urban scale development with structured parking. It would contain a mixture of uses. Once again, it'd be a very walkable community with 10-foot wide multi-use paths as well as a greenway trail or greenway path. It would contain outdoor amenities and public spaces. And its planning staff has determined that it would be generally consistent with your land use plan. I'm going to ask Paul to talk about the buildings, the design of the buildings, if you would. And this slide just once again designates the buildings 3, 2, and 1. And then these are just garages, right? For cars?
Yes, in the center, yes.
That's a point and then forward and back.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, thank you. I'm Paul Shellico. I'm an architect with Ratio Design. I'll walk through the buildings very quickly. So starting out with some precedent images, we look to downtown to inform the overall character of the development, also to help determine what sort of density might be appropriate and what we feel is more of a transitional situation. It's not very suburban. It's not urban in terms of what Charlotte might be, but downtown seems to inform, I think, the overall character of the development. So looking at the commercial vernacular, looking at pocket parks, pocket plazas, looking at the present ground level storefront, glazing, details harken back to more of a, again, the commercial vernacular and the railroad history of the town. Again, just looking at various color palettes, green, white, orange, red brick, and just overall details that speak to not only historic Matthews, but elements that we could use to inform a more modern interpretation of what Matthews might be. So I'm looking at some enlarged details of the residential buildings and the mixed use buildings. Two counterpoint palettes, one that's light, the mixed use building that anchors the center of the project, and then the more the darker in nature building palettes that serve as bookends to the site. Looking at rustication along the ground level, looking at adding glass and awnings and places that might provide people areas to stop and pause and interact with each other, areas for encounter, and providing a walkable, sociable, street edge for the development along Sports Parkway. Again, looking at the east elevations, very similar, looking at the a townhome typology as opposed to more of an industrial typology. But again, just looking at a variety of languages that help break down the street front and create a variety of experiences. Looking on the image to the left is an enlargement of the anchor building that contains leasing offices and other amenities for the large wrap building. So that is, a well-defined, anchor point. Building 3, it's the purely residential building, more of this red brick sort of industrial aesthetic, but still breaking it down to the point with rustication at the ground level and stoops so that people can interact and engage with each other at the ground level. And building 2, this is the center building. This is the mixed use building. The retail experience happens here, plenty of glazing along Sports Parkway, lots of opportunity to create that restaurant element, the retail element, having people engage with this building. Building 1, the wrap building with your structured parking and the leasing office, using a variety of these vertical townhome typologies to break down what is essentially a larger building type into one that's more humane and human scale. And going to the rendered elevations, where this is a view between building 3, which is on the north part of the site, and where it touches or almost touches building 2. You can see the alleyway, the street experience, and what that retail experience might be like as you transition from residential to retail. And this is a view looking north towards the mixed use building. So we're developing an active public plaza so that you have street level, dining, street level social experiences, and you have your multimodal path on the right. So it illustrates just all the ground level activity that could happen with appropriate programming, so that it's not simply a large open plaza, but there are uses that have been planned for these open spaces. This is looking south towards the Sportsplex and building 1, the wrap building. You can see the the leasing corner on the left with those amenities included. And this is looking into the site, looking north. If you were leaving the Sportsplex, looking at sort of the bookend residential elements, and up towards the mixed use building in the center. And this would be looking into the courtyard on the western edge of the site. And you can see it's sort of lots of green, public, semi-public spaces and private space. It's a gradient of spaces along this along this terraced green space. So that there's again a variety of public and private experiences along the building edge. And Jason, if you want to address the bike facilities.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Mochizuki with the developer. Several folks brought up the importance of bikes and the relative location of where they're parked and, being out of the elements and so forth. And, we certainly agree. At NRP, we strive to integrate multimodal transportation into all of our communities to the greatest degree possible. What you're looking at right now is actually from our most recent project in Charlotte in the Optimus Park neighborhood. It's called the Parkwood. You can see that we have basically a lot of different bicycle facilities available on site. We offer like professional grade bicycle mechanics equipment, as you can see here, bicycles for rent and helmets that are available for rental for free. Just due to the natural advantages of the site, given its close proximity to the Sportsplex, being a short ride, from downtown, and having several other methods of transportation available at the site, including the quick drop-off point that will be serviced by CATS and Uber, as well as the Silver Line here in the near future. We just think this is a great amenity to offer our potential residents. This particular project is also on a light rail. It's right across the street from the Parkwood stop at the Blue Line. One of actually 3 communities that we offer this. And that's it.
You would provide bicycle parking in the deck as well?
Yes, that's correct.
We're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
Yeah, I want to go back to the affordable housing component of all of this. I do agree that, 5% at 80 or 5% at 80% AMI is not enough. Is there any consideration to maybe doing that 5% at 80% and then doing another 5% at 60% where it gets, more folks who, teachers, nurses, that sort of thing as well?
We'd have to, Jason would have to have a conversation with and get back with you on that, Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Tufano.
Yes, I need your concurrence on a number. Would you say that the minimum size of floor level retail space would be about 1,200 square feet?
The minimum size of the retail space?
Yeah.
Yeah. Potentially.
The reason I'm asking that question is because 18,750 divided by 1,200 is 15 businesses, 15. And if you were to increase the size of those particular floor plans, the number drops dramatically. Typically in a strip mall, 1,500, 1,200 to 5,000 square feet per for business. And if you go to the higher end, we get down to 5 businesses or 3 businesses. The point I'm trying to make is the complexity of this issue. So in other words, say 18,750 sounds like a lot of square feet, but in a community of this size, to have a maximum of 15 businesses and perhaps even less than that really denotes this as being nothing more than a residential community. Thank you.
I just have a comment. I'm not saying whether it's good or bad necessarily, but I think this definitely, the elevations look very urban to me. This looks like South Park or parts of Charlotte. I don't know that we have a lot of anything else that looks like this in Matthews, with the exception possibly of the Briley. It's attractive, but it's different. It's a moving in a new direction for Matthews. Commissioner Urban.
Evening, gentlemen and ladies. I see her hiding back behind there. I'm looking through my notes and I see we've been talking about this since September, and actually October is the first time we've kind of had this board wide. And one of my notes was that to make sure that you're not throwing in fitness, cyber cafe, dog wash, leasing offices, and anything related as accessory or incidental uses to the apartments as part of the 18,750 square feet. So the fitness facility at 3,000 square feet doesn't deduct from the 18,750. And you've heard my architectural comments ad nauseum, probably at least 3 times, kind of going to the mayor's point. The building you have up there right now, building number 2 of all the buildings, I think is really attractive, quite gorgeous. It's got that German Bauhaus, 1920s, 1940s, industrial mill thing going for it. The whole ground level is activated. It would be a great, office above it, and maybe residential above it as well. But that building is one of several, and that has a lot of texture and character. And if you go to the site plan, just looking at its footprint in relative terms to the other buildings, only building number 3 comes even close. Unfortunately, the devil's in the details. The wraparound deck building is naturally by its design big. It's 400 plus or minus 400 linear feet. And my conversations have always been is mid-block to make it look like 2 buildings, which you've kind of done through color and texture from that standpoint. But the scales are sort of incongruent. And to the mayor's point, it's beyond urban. We've talked about that, and I can kind of live with that a little bit. But building number 2 is just so much richer than the rest of it. But you've got a lot of good ideas going for you in a lot of different pieces and parts. But I think the underlying tone, since we've been talking about the text amendment earlier, that's really where the push comes to shove in the situation. So I don't need to talk about the architecture anymore. I think the decision and the conversation has to sort of focus now on road A, rightfully labeled A, because it's going to be the primary road slicing through there. And why, the ground level of both buildings 1 and 2 are not activated would be a question. And also the fact is you're coming in on Sports Parkway, why building number 3 doesn't have some level of activity. And this is I'm going to half step backwards talking about, well, if roadway A was all ground level is retail, road B, Sports Parkway, 50% of the road level was retail, that would begin to talk about something. But I'm afraid that the retail or the entertainment aspect of it, speaking for myself, I think Commissioner Fano follows suit as well, is woefully inadequate. If we're just talking about roadway A from that aspect of it. And there's other components, but I think we have to get over certain hurdles. I think the architecture obviously could be resolved. It's kind of interesting to hear the architect talk about this. And I wonder if I sound the same way. I'm painting pretty pictures and all and things like that. And everybody's going, well, I'm looking at that and I'm looking at this and I'm not quite seeing it. And it's interesting that our world, we see things differently. You say, hey, I took the context of downtown Matthews and I can see faces on the board going, I don't get it. So it's night and day kind of conversation. We don't need to debate that. It's just one of those things. But I really like building number 2, the scale, the look, the texture, that whole ground level. It reminds me of a Woolworths 5 and Dime, which would be, Mass General Store, that kind of thing. But I just don't think there's enough of it right now. So I'm going to kind of keep quiet about the overall thing and see where the rest of the board takes this thing as we're working through that text amendment.
And Commissioner Urban, could I respond to one thing you said? There is there is a note on the plan that says the gross floor area of accessory uses relating to the multifamily dwelling units, such as a leasing and management office, fitness facility, and other amenities shall not be counted towards the 18,000.
And that's great. And I don't know whether or not like the cyber cafe or the fitness, if that's open to the general public either. That in essence does add to your retail to some degree, but I just know that it's a great ploy by most multifamily developers is, I got 20,000 square foot of retail. And oh, by the way, I got a fitness center. It's 5,000 square feet, tack 5,000 off and he goes home. We've all done it. So
well, that's why we put that in.
And I love you for it, man. We love you, John.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the elected officials? Questions? Commissioner Garner?
this may seem really basic, but the terraced landscape and potential seating area is this, really great idea in my mind. And I love how it invites people in, but at the same time, I'm curious how the ownership of the space, how that plays with public interaction and how people will feel invited or how people living there may not want that interaction. It seems like that's one of those things that's key to your activating the space in the text amendment. So I'm curious how that will become sort of a public space, or if it's intended to be a public space.
Commissioner Garner, it is intended to be a semi-public space. One of the comments that we got when we were reviewing with the board earlier on is that there'll be a fair amount of foot traffic of folks coming up from the sportsplex, utilizing those trail systems that John covered earlier. And this terrace system will provide, along with the public amenity space across the street, and I guess not the dog park, but the public amenity space as well, will provide sort of public seating areas for folks that are, walking around in transit, or maybe have gotten lunch from some of the other retail vendors that will eventually be here on site.
Have you done something like that in other developments, and how is that received by residents, and how successful is it with public interaction?
With a specific terrace system exactly like this, I'm not aware of something that's directly the same. We do have a number of other projects that have kind of semi-public seating areas like this that have integrated other mixed uses. And I'm not on the operational side, obviously, but I'm not aware of any of the projects that we've done here in the state or anywhere else where that's really come into play. I mean, I think that our projects, we have a integrated management firm that works on all of our deals, and they're pretty experienced, I think, with managing those sorts of concerns.
There might be some old guy on the fourth floor saying, "Hey kid, get off my lawn." Right? Commissioner Urban.
If we could piggyback on that a little bit, I think it's sort of the devil's in the details a little bit. You're familiar with Hearst Tower downtown. They created their mini Rockefeller Center. I mean, here was a great opportunity to put some food service, hospitality venue items in there, make it truly semi-public because you still own it, but to really activate that space in which people, to Renee's point, walking down the street would feel comfortable. Hey, there's a Nathan's Hot Dogs. This is good, grand. And if this is truly an urban environment, then the guy on the second and third and fourth floor are prepared for that conversation. They're not like living down the street here on the fourth floor. It should be quiet. Well, here they expect energy and activity. And I think that is a great opportunity. I'd be willing to make a deal with you on trading retail for different retail locations to activate that space differently.
We'd certainly welcome comments.
All right. Seeing no more questions from the town board, does the planning board have any questions for the applicant? Sure, go ahead, sir.
Functional, yeah. On the building 2, the retail spaces on the bottom level, I just wonder how easy it will be to expand or contract those spaces and still maintain, don't want to be able to hear the guy next door with whatever his business might be. So I think it would be a good thing if that building had movable partitions or something that would be fairly easy to relocate to make a business that may want to take up half that space, or you may wind up with 10 businesses in little spaces. And so I guess my question is when you design that building, the construction phase of that needs to keep that in mind, that first floor needs to be pretty flexible.
They wouldn't be load bearing walls, sir. They would be, if you had a 5,000 square foot space that was divided into 2 units of 2,500 square feet, and then 3 years later somebody wanted the whole 5,000 square feet, that's not an issue. It's a good question.
All right, are there any questions from anybody else in the room tonight? for this applicant. Anybody online, Maureen? Anybody still awake? Okay. Since this is tied to the previous one, we will need to continue this to our February 13th meeting. I would entertain such a motion.
I'll make a motion that we continue this item until February 13th.
A second. Is that acceptable?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, a second by Commissioner Urban. All in favor? Opposed? Pass unanimously. Thank you. Let's take about a 7-minute break and we will add it. We'll go to 10:07 on the public hearing since we're taking a break, but I think some of us look kind of nervous up All right, thank you everyone for accommodating that break. I think a lot of us feel much better. Let's move on to item D, zoning application 2022-768 car wash to change the zoning from I1CD to BHCD on that certain property located on the east side of East Independence Boulevard between Matthews Mint Hill Road and Matthews Township Parkway, and being further designated as tax parcel 193-31182. Mr. Camp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The applicant is still working on their TTM, Transportation Technical Memo. So the request from the applicant is to continue this to February 13th.
Entertain such a motion.
I'll make a motion that we postpone this until February 13th.
Second.
Continue.
Continue it.
Yeah, continue.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Urban. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll go on to item E. Zoning application 2022-752 Matthews Gateway to change the zoning classification and changing conditions from R9 and MUD to a single MUD district on that certain property designated as 1205 East John Street near the I-485 interchange to accommodate a multi-use development with a maximum of 240,000 square feet of office space, retail, restaurant, and other commercial uses, a maximum of 150 hotel rooms, a maximum of 120 single-family attached dwelling units, and a maximum of 285 multifamily dwelling units, and further designated as tax parcels 215042-19 and 12 and 13. This is continued from October 10th. Mr. Will, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. Happy New Year. Good to see everyone. I will make this brief. This is, we have also, received a request. It's been a long new year already. I apologize. We have received a request from the applicant respectfully to continue this public hearing to February 13th, 2023. They continue to work on some of their transportation elements, which also impact the site layout. And staff recommends the continuation as well.
Any questions, comments, or motions?
I'll make a motion that we continue the public hearing until February 13th, 2023. My goodness, we're gonna be here late that day.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool and a second by Commissioner Urban, as per usual. Sorry. Thank you, Commissioner Urban. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. That passed. I was just noting that it seems to be the dynamic duo on everyone, but that's fine. We've got to get things done here. We'll move on to the next one, zoning application 2022-759 Midfield Station to change the zoning classification from R15 to ENT on that certain 66.85 acre site south of Matthews Mint Hill Road and north of the Sportsplex, seeking mixed-use development consisting of multifamily units, single-family attached units, and non-residential units, and being further designated as tax parcels 215-081-13 and 215-081-33. This also was continued from October 10th. Mr. Hallman.
So we've also received a request to continue this public hearing to March 13th. Staff does recommend granting that continuation to March 13th for the public hearing.
We have any questions, comments, or motions?
I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing until March 13th, 2023.
Thank you.
If you're going to twist my arm, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion from Mayor Pro Tem McCool, a second from Commissioner Urban. All in favor? Any opposed? Again, we're going to have some really busy nights coming up, folks, this spring or late winter. Move on to the next one. Item F, zoning application 2022-770 Crown Point Commons to change the zoning from OCD to MUDCD on that certain property located on the corner of Sam Newell and Claire Drive, north of Rice Road, east of East Independence, and being further designated as tax parcel 19319-109. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're going to move forward with this one tonight.
All right.
All right. Okay, so as the mayor said, this is application 2022-770. Change in zoning from office conditional to mixed use development, MUD. The site is located at the corner of Sam Newell and Claire Drive. And it's currently vacant. And the proposed use is for a parking parking area and a stormwater BMP. The applicant proposes to rezone this parcel to MUD in order to integrate it into the mixed-use development that is occurring on the adjacent property. Okay, so I have starred the, there it is, starred the parcel in question. This parcel here and also the parcel to the south, which we'll be able to see, are already zoned MUD. Parcel itself in question is less than an acre. It's undeveloped, but once rezoned will be part of a larger project that will contain multifamily, commercial, and office uses. The site will be developed as a parking area and a stormwater best management practice, BMP stormwater pond. Previous zoning actions on this parcel was owned by the town, who recently sold it. And it was owned OCD in the 1990s because I think the intent, it was given to the town to use as a fire station location. It is part of a larger mixed-use project that received site plan approval in November 14th of last year. So this is the site and the site plan. It's a little fade. It's a little like light, and so, but this is the parking area, and this is the proposed stormwater management area. The hatched area will be is a buffer, undisturbed buffer. And I'm going to move to the next slide because it shows sort of the bigger picture. So what we have is, this is the parcel that's currently zoned office. The rest of the project is zoned MUD and was approved in November, as I mentioned. So it's kind of an interesting request. It's just going to be used for parking and stormwater. And it's definitely part of a larger project that the board has approved. The only comments and outstanding issues were to show the 10-foot side path and to dedicate right of way. I'm going to go back to the site plan. As you can see, the parcel does extend into Sam Newell. Some of that will have to be dedicated, and as a part of the larger project, there is a 10-foot multi-use path that is to go along Sam Newell and also in front of this parcel. So that concludes the staff report. I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may have at this time.
Any questions from the town board or the planning board? Seeing none, I know the applicant here, Mr. McVeigh, you're going to speak on this one? Welcome back, sir.
Good evening, Mayor Higdon. Good evening, Mayor Higdon, Mayor Pro Tem McCool, members of the Board of Commissioners, members of the Planning Commission. Keith McVeigh with Morven Allen, assistant Elida Properties with this rezoning request. Rob's done a good job describing what the request is. It's really just to rezone this parcel to be consistent with the adjacent piece so that it can be combined with the larger mud piece. As shown here and integrated into that mixed-use residential development that you guys approved in November, a combination of office, retail, and residential, maintains the same buffer and setbacks along both the right-hand side and the Carolyn Street. I'm not going to remember the name of the street. Claire, thank you. And you started with a C. Thank you, Rob. Claire and Sam Newell. There are notes on the plan already committing to right-of-way dedication and the multi-use path, but we'll add the illustrations to the site plan. Happy to answer questions.
Commissioner Urban.
So Keith, is that a wet or dry detention basin?
I believe it's a dry detention pond.
Okay. So what are we doing in terms of, I know we can't do anything in the pond itself. Maybe there's some things we can do, but I'd like to see some landscaping enhancements around that.
We can do that.
Obviously, you may also probably be putting up a fence would be my guess.
I'll have to
don't
check.
know.
I'll have to check about the fence.
Yeah, because I don't know what the grade change is or whatever, but I mean, I just don't want to, people walking by or driving by and seeing a hole. So I think there's a lot of nice features in which you can address a dry detention basin. Your part of your conditions is just limit the uses to only parking and detention.
We can do that.
I'm done. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the board or the planning board for Mr. McBain? Anybody from the public care to comment on this petition? Either in the room or virtually, Maureen? All right, it appears that we're ready to close this public hearing and send it to the planning board for their January 24th meeting. All right.
Yes, sir.
Right. So I would entertain such a motion. Commissioner Gardner?
I do have a question, and this may have been part of the previous rezoning, but are you saying you'll complete Claire Drive over to Sam Newell?
We adjoin Claire Drive and there will be a buffer next to Claire Drive. We don't have the ability to continue Claire Drive. There's a spite strip between the properties.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a
Mayor Pro
motion,
Tem
that
McCool.
I'll make a motion that we close this public hearing and send it to the January 24th planning board meeting.
Confused.
No.
No, we're on zoning application
What about?
2020-770 Crown Point Commons.
Yes, but I mean, don't we still have H to go?
We've already Midfield.
Just to close this public hearing.
Oh,
We don't take a motion. Anything at this point.
Okay, we're going to refer it. There you go.
Refer, thank you.
Hey, it's a new year. So this will go to the planning board on January 24th and come back to us on February 13th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
No vote needed tonight. Let's move on to item G, zoning application 2022-771, 335 East Matthews Street that changes zoning from R20 to HUC on that certain property designated as 353 East Matthews Street and being further designated as tax parcel 215-011-04. Darren, you're up again.
Thank you, Mayor. So just as a reminder, this is town-owned property and the town is the applicant. This is for 335 East Matthews Street. Not quite a corner lot. It's kind of the peninsula lot right at the intersections of Matthews Mint Hill Road, East Matthews Street, and Matthews Station Street. It's right beside the apartments, right here beside Town Hall. Current zoning is R20 and the proposed zoning is HUC. And then just for reference, some of the surrounding area, this is in the downtown. There is a proposed Silver Line route that along Matthews Mint Hill and East Matthews Street. The site would also be within about a quarter mile of a proposed light rail station. So currently, or right now, the site is about 0.722 acres or roughly 31,450 square feet in size. There is an existing home located on the property and access is currently coming off of East Matthews Street in the rear. No previous zoning action has been taken on this property. Again, just showing some of the driveway locations and buildings surrounding the property. Again, Town Hall is located here. So we have Matthews Station Street, East Matthews, Matthews Mint Hill. Across the street from the property, across Matthews Mint Hill, we do have some office buildings. And then again, to the bottom of the plan, there's an apartment building located across from it. Back to the east, there is still single family detached located around the property. Just a few interesting notes from our land use plan. So the land use plan addresses this as part of our downtown area and designates it as a transit-oriented development area. Our downtown master plan also designated this area as part of the Matthews Station Street extension, or recommended extension area. So all of the development that the town did with Matthews Station Street, this was identified as that. And that showing, it did show it as townhome development. It does call for mixed use in the area, a mix of densities within downtown next to the transit station, promoting sustainable development, encourage alternative forms of transportation while prohibiting single-use buildings and limiting parking where appropriate. Abiding by the guidelines set forth in the downtown master plan, encouraging a variety of uses on site, and expand alternative styles of housing or mixed-use developments while creating a unique and aesthetically appeal through the site that approve for the architectural design and building materials. Interestingly with the site, if you'll remember, we did do we did hire a consulting firm to do a site analysis of the site. So as part of that process, we did go through a public engagement period. Some of the feedback that we heard from the public regarding that was for variety of land uses. The most popular was some type of parks, plazas, open space, food and beverage, or some type of shopping or retail located on the site. Some of the site elements that we heard back, or features that we heard back from the public, were for natural plantings, plaza and seating area, or flexible public open space. For the building styles, use commercial space, and single family, and then did receive some drop off for townhomes, but that townhomes was the fourth largest. And as part of that site analysis, the consultant did provide 5 site plan scenarios. We'll just briefly go through those since those were previously viewed by the board. But it was using the existing structure on site, using the existing structure and some type of adaptive reuse. In this case, it was kind of like a pop-up market. Clearing the site and putting in a single-use multifamily, or possibly some type of retail multifamily or retail office space multifamily. So just a few notes. We are requesting HUC for this property. So HUC is a traditional district. There would be no conditional attachments to the zoning district. This would just be a by right rezoning. But a few things to note on that. This is in our downtown. HUC does have stricter zoning requirements than can be found in in most of our other traditional districts. It would also have to adhere to the downtown overlay district and the downtown design guidelines, downtown streetscape improvement plans. So even though the project or the parcel is by right, there's still a laundry list of, I guess, heighten or strengthen ordinances to restrict development. And at the end of the day, it still is owned by the town of Matthews, so we do have some negotiating power with anything that develops on site. All right, so that concludes the staff report. Any questions or comments from the board?
Commissioner Urban?
Diane, what precludes, was it statutory policy that precludes us from making this a conditional site, HUC conditional? than having the board take a whack at this as opposed to it being by, I know it's a lot of requirements on it, obviously with the overlays and the HUC zoning, but what prevents it from being conditional?
Right. So typically with a conditional plan, there are certain guidelines in our ordinance that require for some type of specified use to come in or tying some type of specific site plan for that. I know in this case, we're really looking at, I guess, marketing it and just providing some type of availability for the project. So we really don't have anything that's site specific for this property yet.
Yes, what we have, Commissioner Urban, is the town is prohibited from putting any conditionals on property, even ones that we own. The only time you can put conditions on zoning properties is when you have an agreement with another property owner who is the applicant. But on our own, we cannot put any conditions on our own property.
So when someone goes through the process and says, why can't you do X, Y, or Z? It has to be by right HUC.
Yes, but one thing, if you sold it, you could put conditions and restrictions on the property itself by contract, not by zoning.
So there would be some.
So there's some manner for the city to have some control over it. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the town board, planning board, public, or dwindling public, whether here or online? Okay, this will go to the planning board. I'm sorry, just can you please come forward, state your name and.
I'm Richard Jordan. I am the adjoining property owner. What are the specifics in the HUC? What specific?
Can you speak at the mic, sir, please? We have
specific activities are covered under HUC.
So type of uses?
Yeah, uses, I guess.
So the HUC does provide for a variety of uses. There's a variety of retail office uses, including residential uses. We don't have the specific, we do have it in our UDO. I can forward you our land use table if you'd like, so we can sort through that. And then we can also make that available to the board, our planning board per request.
See our town manager taking that down as an action item, so we'll get that list to you, sir.
Okay. The residential use part of this, is that only, that's multifamily and not single family? It precludes single family, doesn't it?
There might. I have to double check, but I believe single family detached may be allowed within the HUC.
Okay. I was just curious of what.
Understand, you live next door. We'll make sure we get the information to you.
Okay.
Do you want my card?
Yes.
Okay, I'll get that to you.
Okay.
Down here in a second.
Thank you. All right, this will be sent to the planning board for their meeting on January 24th. And come back to us on February 13th. And I'll entertain a motion to reconvene our regular meeting.
Motion to reconvene our regular meeting.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Tufano, a second by Commissioner Urban, all in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll go on to our planning and development business for tonight. 9A zoning application 2022-762, The Ridge. The change of zoning from R12 to I1 CD on that 45.03 acre parcel of land located on Campus Ridge Road and being further designated as tax parcel 215-221-02. Mr. Will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you recall, last month, staff had a number of concerns with this, and we have received a request from the applicant to continue the decision on the rezoning until next month, while site plan and notes are updated, and while they work with staff to alleviate some of the concerns that we heard last month. So the recommended motion here is to continue the decision on rezoning 2022-762 to February 13th, 2023, for those reasons.
Have any questions, comments, or motions from the board?
I'd like to make a motion to continue the decision on rezoning 2022-762 to February 13th, 2023.
Thank you. We have a motion from Commissioner Tefano. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Hoover. Are there any discussion? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? So that passes 5-2 with Mayor Pro Tem McCool and Commissioner Garner in opposition. So this will come back to us on February 13th. Excuse me. We'll move on to the next item, zoning application 2021-742 Matthews Medical Building to change the zoning from I1 and I1 CD to B3 CD and being property designated as 720 Lyle Cruz Circle and 641 Samuel Road, and further being designated as tax parcel 193-24524 and a portion of 193-24508. This was continued from July 11th. Mr. Will.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
We need to make sure I need to stand in recusal. My office building
Yes,
is right next door.
Thank you. Commissioner Urban is recused from this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is an older one, but they have been working really hard to work through a number of the design issues for the undisturbed open space and the tree save on the site. They have requested just a 1-month continuation in order to finalize these details. The request for continuation was attached to your packet, and the applicant would be happy to give you an update as to what they have been doing in the past months to come back in front of the board for consideration. But at this time, staff recommends continuing zoning petition 2021-7-42 to the February 13th, 2023 meeting.
So will the board, do you want to see the presentation?
Yeah, I would. Thank you.
This is the John Carmichael show tonight.
How are you, Mr. Mayor? We'll be brief. And this is Thorne Bassett. Y'all remember Thorne from Flagship Healthcare Properties. So let's see. You will recall it's about a 4.3 acre site. Y'all know where it is, I'm sure. And this is an aerial. And so the request is to rezone the site from I1 and I1 CD to B3 CD to allow 45,000 square foot medical office building. And this is the site plan. We were before the board, if you recall, for a variance, a public improvement variance for the 10-foot wide multi-use path and 8-foot wide planing strip along the site's frontage on Matthews Township Parkway. And there were a lot of challenges, but the variance was not granted. And so you are kind enough to give Thorne 6 months to work with FEMA. Thank you. Because they have to impact the stream or the culvert. They've made a lot of progress, and that's actually received approval.
We've got the approval.
So that's been approved, and now they just need to finalize the tree save and the undisturbed open space. And we think we can get that done, or we will get it done prior to February 13, but there's just a couple things that need to be tied up, but the approval from FEMA has been accomplished. And there were some questions as to whether or not that could be done in 6 months, but they got that done.
Appreciate all the hard work. Are there any comments, questions, or motions? Commissioner Hoover.
Yes, on July 11th, when we last discussed this, I had asked if the private road issue could be handled. Has the adjacent property ever been contacted on that?
I prepared a letter to our neighbors, I believe, from when I was reviewing the minutes from the July 11th meeting. We discussed if we would be willing to repair any damage along Lyle Cruz Circle, the private road, if there anything happened beyond anticipated wear and tear. And we are committed to that. And I prepared a letter to send to the neighbors stating as such.
So you've prepared one you have not yet
I've
sent?
not sent it.
Okay, okay. And I guess this would be to Mr. Buckley. I would like to ask our town attorney a question here, because I'm kind of curious about this. Okay, we know the properties owners across the street on Fee Simple Center of Lost Grove, as does Abdel, their section of the parcel, that they're trying to obtain. My question is, if this doesn't get worked out, the zoning goes through, the property adjacent from the other side of Lost Grove is having us, I believe, getting destroyed from traffic or whatever. Can he shut his section down because it won't be landlocked? Medical fire and all that will be able to access the property. And would he be able to shut his property?
Everyone in that area would have the same rights to those private roads as everybody else in that area. And I say area, I'm talking about in the area that is, I guess, defined by a subdivision plat.
Yep.
So all of them in that subdivision would have the same rights. It's like a reciprocal easement. So one cannot dictate the closure of a road inside that subdivision.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking back to Whitewater when they shut that. I know that's a totally different thing, but I just got me thinking, can they shut their section down if it's?
No, everything in that subdivision is got to remain just as it is, and everybody in that subdivision has the same rights to all the private roads as everybody else in that subdivision.
Okay, and even though the other property owner is responsible for all the maintenance and all of his side of that he owns Fee Simple.
Well, those are internal conditions and restrictions that we really have nothing to do with. Right.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, there's.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
I'd like to make a motion to continue the zoning petition 2021-742 to the February 13th, 2023 meeting.
Do we have a second? Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Garner. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes 6-0 with Commissioner Urban in recusal, and you're welcome, sir, to rejoin the meeting. Move on to item 10, consent
Thank you.
agenda.
I'd like to make a motion, we approve consent agenda A through E.
Motion by Commissioner Whitley. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mayor Pro Tem McCool. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. We're going to move on to unfinished business. Consider revisions to employee pay classification and compensation. Town Manager Hawk.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. So as the memo before you lines out, the town hired David Hill with Piedmont Triad Regional Council of Governments back in June 2022 to complete a pay and classification study as well as a benefits study for the town. And the main directive that David had was to make recommendations for how we could ensure that our wages were as competitive as possible within the marketplace. So as the board heard at our work session last meeting, David has completed that study and had a number of recommendations for the town board to consider, both related to pay and benefits. For the purposes of tonight, we have separated those two conversations. We'll take up any consideration related to benefits at a later date. We know that might take a bit more conversation. Some of you expressed that you might want to look at some other benefits as well. So we will have that meeting a little bit later this calendar year. But for tonight, we wanted to focus on the pay recommendations that Mr. Hill made. And the main takeaway of these pay recommendations is that we're looking to move our pay scales to what's considered 80% of the competitive market. That means that our pay would be approximately higher than 80% of our competitors across the region. Kind of a broad brushstroke, it would put us just behind Charlotte and Mecklenburg County for our frontline positions. Those localities would still very much pull away at the higher ends of the pay scale, but it does put us very close with the majority of the positions that we're hiring on a regular basis in our police, fire, and public works departments in particular. Again, as the memo outlines, I won't go over all of these, but this is really about trying to position the town to be an employer of choice. We want people who are interested in working for the town of Matthews to look at us first if they're interested in working in the region, if they're looking for something different than what maybe the city of Charlotte or some of the larger localities would be able to offer. And of course, we want to be able to retain the great employees that we do have. We want them to feel like they're getting a fair wage for the work that they're doing. And we think that this pay plan sends a strong message about how seriously we take that. We did some work with AMI that some of the board requested, and that's area median income. We just wanted to kind of look at how do our wages compare to the wages across our county, and what does that mean from an affordable housing lens. This certainly does not solve all of that. We do still have a number of employees that would be making less than 100% of AMI, but it certainly does start to move the needle and move people up those pay scales to hopefully what is closer to a living wage. In general, this pay plan has a base floor of $19.50 an hour for our the lowest grade on the pay scale. That's equivalent to $40,560 annually. And then the pay scale scales up from there. There's also a lot of information in the memo just about competitiveness. So about 87% of our workforce falls into police, fire, and public works. These are, of course, our public safety positions. They are our frontline personnel, and they're also the hardest to fill in many cases. So recruitment is fierce. We know what's happening to police as an industry across the country. There are a lot of other pressures on that department as well. And so, again, we want to be able to really put ourselves out into the field and make a statement that we want those candidates if they're interested in coming to work for us. So what David did recommend for implementation, if this is proposed, is what is considered a range penetration implementation strategy. So what that means is that if a current employee is, say, 20% of the way in their current pay scale, then they would be placed 20% of the way in their new pay scale. That helps alleviate compression. If you don't make movements like that and you were to just create new pay scales, you would have a lot of compression. You would have new hires potentially coming in making more than our existing employees. So that implementation philosophy is very important to this. We did put a cap at the top of that, again, just to send the message that we're trying to drive as much of these funds down into the pay scale as possible. So we do have some upper limits on what an individual employee would be able to receive. The other component of implementation of this pay plan as proposed would be ceasing the ARPA CLFRF premium pay program. Those of you who were on the board back in November of 2021 will remember that program where we took a portion of our ARPA funds, we created a premium pay program, and we have been paying qualified positions a supplemental $1 or $2 per hour since that time in order to try to supplement what we knew were some lower pay scales than what we desired. The intention of that program was to carry through June of this year when we expected we might be able to implement this pay plan. But with the board's approval, starting this pay plan study early, we have the results back early, and we would like to move forward with the permanent improvements to the pay scales. We would then cease the premium pay program because it would no longer be needed. We have run the math and no employee would lose any money. So whatever they are currently receiving through the premium pay program, they would at least receive that much through this new pay scale, if not receive more, depending on how it falls for that particular employee. So looking at cost, the total full fiscal year implementation is expected to be approximately $2.2 million. That does include about $1.75 million in base salary costs, as well as about $439,000 in fringe benefit expenses. As we discussed at our work session, we do fully expect that we can absorb the implementation at this point in time for the remainder of the fiscal year, utilizing lapsed salaries, and if necessary, a small component of the premium pay dollars that have already been set aside for salaries. Whatever would be left with the premium pay that is unspent would then be freed up, and the board could allocate that for other ARPA qualifying purposes. Kind of all of that in a nutshell means that we're not looking for any additional funds beyond what's already budgeted in order to proceed with implementation at this time. As we look towards our next fiscal year, if this is approved by the board, it would be put into the proposed budget the way that we do salaries and benefits every single year. We do know that it's a revaluation year, and so 1 penny will generate approximately $700,000 is what we're anticipating based on what we're hearing from the county. So we would look to have what would be considered an effective tax rate increase, where whatever we need to adjust our tax rate to for the revaluation process, we would need to then generate new revenue in order to cover these costs for the full fiscal year moving forward. At this point in time, we anticipate that would be somewhere probably in the neighborhood of 3 cents per 100. So with that, happy to answer any questions that any of you may have, and we can go from there. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem McCool.
I don't have a question. I just have a statement in support of this. I've spoken with Becky a lot about this, and I see this almost purely as a public safety issue. You know, a majority of our employees are police and firefighters, and so if we underpay them, we cannot retain them or even recruit them. So doing this will in turn make our town safer. It'll be better for the organization, better for the town. I think this is a slam dunk. We have great employees, want to continue to hire our employees, and I think it's part of a sacrifice folks will have to make on taxes to continue the safety of the town. That's all I have to say.
Question.
Mr. Tufano.
Yes, is this pay plan is for all employees in the town of Matthews, not just fire and police?
That's correct.
All right. Quick question on the 2023, 2024. You said it'd be $700,000 per penny. If you multiply that out times our current 29.5 cents, I believe it is what we're at the moment. That comes out to an ad valorem tax rate of 20.6 million. We're currently at 14.1 million. So how do we make that $6 million jump? You're expecting the property value, the assessed value for our town prior to the revaluation, just the current increase in assessed value. Is that how we get to the 20.6 million?
We're not expecting 20.6 million in revenue next year. So through the revaluation process, we will get the total of all property values from the county, and we will then need to complete a calculation where we will essentially have to determine what our tax rate would be if we did not have revaluation. So essentially you have to roll it back, at least on paper. So we would be bringing in an equivalent amount of revenue as we were before the revaluation process. And then there's an additional factor built in for natural growth. So as an example, through the revaluation process, it might say that our tax rate, if we wanted to bring in an equivalent amount of revenue, would be say 22 cents instead of the current 29.5. That's our starting point for the budgeting process. And then anything that we wanted to add as a new expenditure would be quote unquote, rolled it back on paper to 22 cents. This 3 cents would then be on top of it. You'd be at 25 cents, not 29.5. And so it does not automatically generate new revenue through the revaluation process.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is your intention to be revenue neutral plus whatever padding is necessary for inflationary purposes after the revaluation.
My intention is to complete the calculation to determine what revenue neutral would be, and then include any additional revenues that would be needed to cover whatever the expenditures are. This would just be one of them. So what that exact amount would be, we're too early in the process to.
So we're currently at 14.1 for ad valorem tax. So let's pretend we're revenue neutral after revaluation. So 2.1 million is what we're going to need in order to implement this. And by the way, just for everybody's benefit, I am all for this 110%. I just want to make sure the public knows exactly what's happening here. So 14.1 million is our current ad valorem, and we're asking for an additional 2.1 million to finance this. So that comes out to a little over 14.5% increase in tax.
So 14.1 million was 2 fiscal years ago. That's not current.
That was the 2022 fiscal
Right,
year.
and we're in FY23.
Yeah, I know,
So
but we
it's
haven't
gone up.
finished 23 yet.
Right.
Okay, so I'm basing it on figures that we do have. So 14.1 million at the end of 22. We're asking for an additional 2.1, which means that we're going to, simple math, we're going to have to increase the tax rate by 14.6%. So it's important that the people know that this is if this is approved, that we're stuck with it going forward in terms of we must raise taxes in the next fiscal year in order to raise the money necessary to pay for these increased wages, which is, I'm totally for that. I just want to make sure that everybody knows the numbers. And that's in addition to whatever increase in taxes are going to have to come about due to any revaluation, where we're going to add the padding factor after revaluation if we're not revenue neutral, plus bond issues that may be coming up. So we're looking at a substantial tax burden increase to the public in the fiscal year 2024. Having said all that, I am totally all for implementing this plan for police and fire. However, I would like to ask if there was any possibility that we could separate police and fire and medic from the public, from the other employees of the town in consideration of this plan. I think I read somewhere that 89%, is that an incorrect number? 89% of all of our people are within, all of our employees are within fire and police, is that correct?
No, 87% is police, fire, and public works.
87, oh, and public works.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do you happen to know what police and fire are percentage wise?
Not offhand.
Okay, thanks.
And just to respond to that, respectfully, Commissioner Tofano, our plan operates as one plan, and we have had significant issues with recruitment and retention in our other departments as well. As an example, to fill our senior finance specialist position, we had to go out to the market 3 or 4 times. Finally had to hire a firm to find the person for us and pay a placement fee. So the issues with recruitment are not just specific to our police and fire departments. Those are, of course, very important departments, and we are very focused on them as well. But the issues that we have are not isolated to those departments. And given that police, fire, and public works do make up such a large percentage of the pay scale, any financial benefit that you might see by delaying the implementation for the other positions would be negligible compared to the entire cost of the plan. So it's not something that I would remotely recommend or support at this time.
If I could just make a comment to Commissioner Tofano's comments. I agree with your points. However, there will be some natural growth. We've grown a lot in Matthews, and so we will be taking in naturally more taxes because there's more people living here and there's more properties. So that will offset a little bit of what you just said.
That may be the case, but that's why I explicitly asked the question about starting off at revenue neutral. So it doesn't matter how much we grow if we're going to have a revenue neutral.
Not true.
Revenue neutral is 14.1 million
No, revenue neutral is the tax rate. And if more people pay that tax rate, you'll have more money.
Oh, that may be the case. Yes. That may be the case, but
That's what revenue neutral is, correct?
correct.
So if the tax rate is the same, but more people are paying the taxes, we'll get more income.
That's correct, but we don't know what that number is at this point in time. Okay, I'm only working with numbers that we have available.
It will be bigger. It will be more.
Yeah,
Because of
thank
the
you.
growth. Commissioner Whitley.
Thank you. Listen, I'm a retired police officer. I think everybody know that. And dealing, when I was on the patrol, I knew what it was to have a budget and try to get your employees to where they're competitive and you can keep your employee and bring on some more educated and more efficient employees, so you wouldn't lose them in there. So I talked to Becky and I'm in favor of this project. Certainly, in 2015, when I was elected here, me and John Ross made a conscious effort to increase the pay raise to the police department. And by the way, I am in favor of everybody and all employees of Town of Matthews get this raise. But we've been behind the 8 ball, if so to speak, from day one and trying to keep quality and competitive employees so that we won't lose them to, as I said last month, to Union County Sheriff Department. My dear friend, Sheriff Eddie Cathy, who's telling me he has no vacancies. And certainly this is a great start. And I was listening to Dave when he gave the last presentation. And I think it's something well invested in our town. And I know, Mark, when you talk about the tax and numbers is true, but I've learned to live with, if you want quality and protection, safety, and all of your areas covered, you're gonna have to pay for it. And what I've seen here in the 34 years living in Matthews is that our citizens want our employees, our fire and our police, to be the best. And that's why I pushed to get Fire Station 3 over on our side, because I have called the fire department EMT for 3 times in 34 years to my home. And so I think the time is right. I think the citizens of Town of Matthew understand what's at stake here, and they want to be safe. They want to have equipment that can reach them in a reasonable time for medic, fire, and all. So I just wanted to share that with y'all and just to make sure that we keep pace. And I think this is the best plan I've seen in the 8 years I've been on this board, that's gonna put us in a category where Starlings won't take. It bothers me that a little town of Starling can take police officers from Matthews and pay them more. It should not be that. And I know all y'all hear me say this. I believe in being the best. If I'm gonna be a part of something, I want to be the best. I want our town, Matthews, the Town of Matthews, to have the best police officer, best fire department, and everywhere around. And we are. And I think this is go a long way to bring in new people and keep the good people that we have now. Thank you.
Commissioner Tufano.
Yes, Commissioner Whitley, I just want to make, and everybody make explicitly clear that I am absolutely for this 110% for the police and fire. When I go through these numbers, it's explicitly for the purpose of making sure the public is aware of what this is going to cost the public, and cents on the dollar and revenue neutral and all this sort of thing just sort of goes over people's heads. But when you start talking about what the percentage is of increase that they can anticipate in their taxes, it's a different issue. So the whole purpose of my discussion was just to make sure that the public is as informed as they possibly can be on what we're doing, and I'm totally in agreement with what we're doing. So thank you for that.
Commissioner Hoover, do you have a comment?
Okay, Becky, you may remember when I came back to you in April, May, and said I wanted the 7% increase for these guys. And I appreciate that so much. And then you found it for everyone. I do support 100% the increase for our fire medic and police officers, because I believe anytime you have to put a firearm on the side of your hip or a bulletproof vest on or a uniform to protect you when you go into a burning building to save others, you are the backbone of this town and you should be well paid. And I actually believe if possible, we need to actually go a little higher on these guys. That's my wish. I did have some concerns. When we first did this, when we were doing this, I was under the impression we were looking at this group, our first responders, and those in public works. And so I was all for that. I do have some concerns I want everyone to be paid well, and they need to be paid as what their job is calls for. But I look at it more, and I know, this is government, but I look at it when you're in the corporate world, not everybody gets a raise. You get your evaluation, and then and you get based upon your performance. And so I would like, I did, when I first learned how everyone got it. And when you just brought up your new hires, you can't hire people. Well, I look at, okay, when we have new hires, let's start these people at where then they should be. Then maybe we could get people. And I'm just concerned with the increase we could be, what we're taking on here. I would prefer to focus just on our first responders and those in need in public works, or those who are just your basic town staff that are low, because there are some that, for right now until the coming budget, we could discuss more on this, but I was just a little bit, confused that everyone was going to get this, and just knowing with the cost is going to cost is concerning me. But yeah, I'm 100% for the increase. I don't know. I mean, yes, I'm voting for it, but I do have concerns on the.
And I respect that. I do just want to point out that David Hill in his analysis looked at all positions, and so we didn't just arbitrarily move positions up or say, oh, you get to stay where you are and you automatically get a pay increase. All the positions were looked at, and we made sure that they are in their proper grade on the pay scale. And so if any adjustments needed to be made, moving a position downward, that happened in those appropriate spots. So just know it wasn't just an arbitrary, oh, because everyone is going up, this other position is going up. As part of his work, he looked at every position.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. But here again, you know what I'm going to say? If it all to get the police fire medic higher than what we're expecting, that would be my wish. I don't know if that's possible, but you know.
My recommendation that came up in the work session would be, this is validated work right now. It's a solid recommendation from David Hill. It moves the entire pay plan up to 80%. We have a budget process coming up. We have a lot of other moving parts. If there is appetite for us to continue to look at this for something in July, we'll have additional data points as far as what our neighbors are doing through their budget process. So my recommendation would be to take this action now. And then if the board wants to do more later, that's certainly something we'd be very happy to look at.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Garner.
Okay. Becky, clear. This is a reclassification for everybody.
That is correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure it's not a raise, it's a reclassification.
Thank you.
Of the
Yes.
whole pay
That
grade
is correct.
still. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So when you
Thank
do a reclassification, you don't cut out certain people in the pay grade scale of the town. If it's a reclassification, I think that's what they presented to us. That the whole thing moves up.
That's
I
exactly
just want to
right.
make sure I'm
Yes.
clear.
Thank you. Thank you
All
for
right.
that.
Maureen, can you scroll back up to the part of the memo that talks about the percentage of our employees that are at some percentage of AMI? Where was that? There it is, that bullet point there, 73% of the town's full-time workforce currently earn less than 80% of the 2022 area median income. So the point I want to make to the public, and Commissioner Tofano's comments are well taken. This is a little painful. It does affect our taxes. But these salaries that our employees receive are not exorbitant. They're very reasonable. And when we have 73% currently that earn less than 80% of the AMI, this is the levels we're setting for our affordable housing, attainable housing. And I want to make one more comment. I've been an elected official, I think, longer than anybody but except Commissioner Urban. I think he's got me beat by one term. But I'm entering my 10th year here. And I've often told our employees, all of our employees, that you make it easy to be an elected official here. And Becky and I just went to the Metro Mayors Conference, and we hear mayors from other communities talking about, our police did this and all our citizens are upset, or our firemen did this, or our public works folks did this or that. We don't hardly ever hear those sort of things. I hear nothing but compliments of our employees going above and beyond every day. I mean, probably once a week, I get a call, a text, or an email from some citizen that tells me how great our employees are, all of our employees, anybody in the town. And so you make being an elected official easy, and you're a big part of why people like to live in Matthews. Just a big portion of the quality of life here is because our employees are so fantastic. And I think we have to do this. If we go to 80%, guess what? We're not going to be at 80% long. I can tell you, I've talked to all the mayors in the county, and they're coming right back along with additional reclassifications and raises as well. So we've got to do right by our employees. They've done right by us. They've done a fantastic job, and we need to pay them a livable, reasonable wage. And this is not exorbitant. We're not, I don't think anybody's going to go home and make it rain with their new salary from the town of Matthews. It's a reasonable salary, and it's something that we have to find a way to do. We've got to find a way in our budget to pay our employees what they're worth. And so I support this 100%. Commissioner McCool.
Well, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we approve the adoption and implementation of the amended employee pay and classification plan and cancellation of the ARPA CLFRF premium pay plan effective January 22nd, 2023, as presented in the memo.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McCool, second by Commissioner Tofano. Any further discussion? Commissioner Garner.
I wanted to make a comment too. Becky, I don't know if you remember this meeting 3 years ago, you, me, and Hazen, and maybe the mayor was sitting in there, but I don't remember. He's kind of forgetful.
I was the tall guy.
And I was asking Hazen about pay increases, and he always said, how do we do that fairly, and how can we implement a process like this? And and I probably at the same time, we both looked at you and said, if anybody can do it, Becky can figure it out. So this is a huge success for you and for the town in general to find a way to make this happen. It has been something that's just been itching at the back of my mind. That is something that we need to do. I understand that there's pause that maybe other departments don't sort of meet the urgency of our police and fire, but I guarantee sitting through COVID, I have seen and recognized that every employee in this town plays an essential role. And, I think one of the things that Parks and Rec stepped up and got people through school so that their parents could get back to work. Public Works and the fire department go out and clean the storm drains when we have snow and rain, and they're working hand in hand. And so it's a little bit demoralizing to say that one department deserves a raise, not a raise, but a reclassification over any other department because they are working in sync with each other to get the work done when we have emergencies, when we have catastrophes. And it's an amazing thing to watch. And it does make it easy for us to sit up here and make decisions. And there's so much we don't have to be concerned about. So I really want to thank you, Becky, for making this happen, and for the rest of the staff for making it easy for us to do the work.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. I hope our town employees know that we've got your back, and hope you've got our back.
And I just want to say on behalf of all staff, thank you to all of you. Truly, this means a lot. I know it means a lot to everyone here and everyone who's not here. So we don't take it lightly, and we'll do our best to continue to make everyone proud. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Move on to the mayor's report. And speaking of outstanding employees, I want to recognize our Parks and Rec Director, Corey King, and Special Events Coordinator, Leanne Moore, for making the Christmas holidays really magical again in Matthews. I've received, I'm sure as many people did on this dais, lots of positive comments about all the holiday events we had, from Kwanzaa to Christmas, Hanukkah, all the special things that we did over the holidays were very well received. I want to turn a portion of the mayor's report over to Commissioner and Reverend Whitley to talk a little bit about what's coming up for MLK holiday.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm excited. This is our 7th year of Martin Luther King celebration. We'll kick off this coming Sunday at Mount Moriah at 2:30. We will gather the 4 churches and the public at Mount Moriah for a peaceful march. I talked to the chief today along with Becky. We're gonna, this year, instead of walking up the street, we're gonna use the Crestel Heritage Trail and come in through the backside of Town Hall. We'll gather here, and the mayor is on the program to do welcome here, and we're gonna have open with prayer. We're gonna have some song, and then we're gonna have 2 guest speakers to speak about Martin Luther King and what it means to them. And should be over by 4:30, 4:45. We're gonna leave the church at 3 o'clock, and probably take us 20 minutes to come through to get the crowd here, and start around about 3:15 to about an hour, and then we should be able to dismiss. And then on Monday, we're inviting all of you, and I think I gave a flyer to everyone tonight on the board, that we're inviting you to come and join with us at 10 o'clock on Monday morning for our worship and dedication. And also at that dedication, we will be presenting a young person with a scholarship of $2,500 where the funds of the 4 churches and surrounding churches contribute to. We've been doing that, and to give a young minority kid an opportunity to go to college somewhere. And we got a young lady that's been accepted to UNC Greensboro with a 3.0. And so we're excited to be able to give her a scholarship this year as well too. Our speaker for Monday is going to be the pastor of First Baptist, Pastor Justin Buchanan is going to be our guest speaker for Sunday. And Mayor, you on program as well too. You the mayor, you can talk as long as you want to.
I can do that. I highly recommend that the public attend this event. It's grown every year, I believe, and we see more and more people, and it's a really good coming together of a community. And the other thing I want to mention tonight is, ever since I got to know our Mayor Pro Tem, I realized that he and I are very similar. He's like a very much younger version of myself. We share the same interests in a lot of different things. But man, you've had a rough life. This kid, he was involved shortly after he got elected. He was involved in a major car crash, I believe, with your parents were in the car. Bad car crash, and then he got COVID. And I'm like, well, I'm an old guy. You're in your early 20s. This should be any problem for you. And he was in ICU for like 8 days or something with COVID. So I'm like, gosh. And then most recently, he was in a pretty horrific car crash up around Asheville. And Ken, we're glad you're okay, but man, just don't get so close to me. You've got bad luck, man. But, I do know that you wanted to maybe address the public because there was a lot of people in Matthews really praying for you to overcome this and get well. So.
Well, I appreciate that. Everyone's reached out. I got a lot of emails, calls, texts, and everyone who reached out gave me some strength and kind of helped me pull through. I'm continuing to heal. I'm very, very grateful for first responders because the folks up there they were there in less than 2 minutes. They put me in an ambulance and they got me the help and care. I
Can you maybe
needed.
describe the accident? Because when you told me, I'm like, I can't believe you're.
Yeah, I was stopped on the interstate and rear-ended at 80 miles an hour. So not the most ideal thing. Luckily, I was in a bigger vehicle, so that's what saved my life. But I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful for all the prayers and thoughts, and no more hospital stays for me this year. That's my goal. That's my New Year's resolution.
All right. Thank you. Well, we're glad you're back. We'll move on to the town attorney's report,
No report, Mayor.
town manager's report.
No report.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by the mayor pro tem,